I will call the Monday, December 7th meeting of the Verona Plan Commission to order. We will begin with the roll call. Mr. Sayre, if you would, please.
Commissioner Manley?
Here.
Mayor Hokemer?
Here.
Commissioner Lytle?
Here.
Commissioner Heinzen?
Here.
Commissioner Horsfall?
Here.
And Alderperson Linder is absent and excused.
Thank you. With that, we have a quorum. Next order of business is approval of minutes from the November 2nd meeting of the Plan Commission. Those minutes were included with your packet. What's your pleasure?
Move approval.
We have a motion by Mr. Manley. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Heinzen. Were there any additions or corrections to the minutes of the previous meeting? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried, and the minutes are approved. We do have a lengthy agenda this evening. There are a number of items on the agenda that require us to have a public hearing. So if you look at the agenda, if you have one in front of you or monitoring on the screen, we will take them in order. So please keep in mind that if you're intending to speak on any of these agenda items that are listed as a public hearing, we will be taking them in order. So thank you. With that, I would ask if we have a motion to open a public hearing on a conditional use permit for a proposed indoor commercial entertainment land use known as Toot and Kate's Wine Bar to be located at 103 South Main. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
We have a motion by Mr. Manley. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Lytle. All those in favor of opening the public hearing signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried. We are in the public hearing stage. Mr. Sayre, if you would provide the background, please.
Thank you. The request tonight is for an indoor commercial entertainment land use. This includes restaurants, bars, and other similar establishments. The applicant is proposing to open a wine bar at 103 South Main Street. By ordinance, a public hearing is required before the Plan Commission. We did notify all property owners within 200 feet of this business, similar to all other conditional use permits. And the Plan Commission will be making a recommendation tonight to the council.
Thank you, Mr. Sayre. Is there anyone that wishes to speak on this item under the public hearing? Is there anyone that wishes to speak on this agenda item? If you would, please. And we would ask if you would come to the podium. There should be a sign-up sheet there, and we would ask if you would sign the sheet. And also, for our benefit and those watching at home and those in the audience, if you would state your name and address, please. And also, if you'd make sure that the green button on the microphone is lit up.
Okay, yep.
There you go.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you. I'm Ryan Beekler. This is one of my two business partners, Megan Clark. She's kind of our local connection. She lives in Verona here. I'm in Waukesha.
I'll give you my address. 290 Canterbury Pass.
And what we're hoping to do with Toot and Kate's, it'd be a wine bar, as you stated. And what's going to kind of separate us from other wine bars or other establishments is we're going to have wine equipment that essentially serves as a self-serve unit. You get a card from the bar, and then you go up to these dispensers that have bottles of wines available, and you choose from, we're going to have 16 different bottles available, and you choose, there'll be 3 different pour sizes, and you choose either a taste or a half glass or a full glass pour. So we hope that just kind of separates us a little bit. And then another part of our business plan would to be like a charitable donation back to the city or programs within the city. It's going to be a certain percentage, probably close to about a quarter per drink sold, will go back to various projects within the city.
And in terms of what we're having for the wines, there'll be a mix between white, red, blends. We'll have champagne available behind the bar, along with just a few different beers and pop and water. The food is going to be very simple, bits and bites, cheese and crackers. The space isn't equipped with a kitchen, so we're going to keep it very streamlined. We do have packets here that I would like to pass out to you guys that have our logo, a spec sheet on the system itself, and then just some design pictures if you're interested. Okay?
And if you would, either one of you, for the benefit of those that don't have the packet, you want to talk a little bit about business hours?
Sure.
Sure. We're going to be
You can speak into the microphone. That'll be fine. So it's.
Okay. I feel weird with my back to you.
Mhm.
Sorry.
We're on TV.
Okay. Okay. So we're going to be closed on Mondays. And then Tuesday through Thursday, 3 to 10, open till midnight on Friday, 3 to 12, 12 to 12 on Saturday, and 12 to 10 on Sunday.
Okay, other questions or comments from Plan Commission members? As long as they're up there, seeing none right now, so you can pass those out,
Okay.
that's fine.
Thank you.
And I'm the Toot of the Toot and Kate's. My sister is Katie.
I am not Toot.
Well, thank you. Is there
Thank you.
anyone else in the audience that wishes to speak on this agenda item? Sir, if you would come up, please. And again, please, if you would sign the sheet and provide us your name and address, please.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, I want to say I'm not opposed to the occupancy of this particular establishment. After all, I was born and raised in Verona, 2 doors down in a bar and restaurant, so that certainly isn't something that bothers me. I do have a couple of thoughts about this. I'm 106 South Franklin Street, which is directly to the east of the establishment. And directly to the north of my property, the city has recently torn down 2 buildings and have made a parking lot. Now, the wine bar has 12 parking spaces available. For all of you, that may be sufficient, and it may very well be sufficient. Although I did see in the paper where there would be music, live music at times, which I would think that if there were only 12 spots, some of those parking would have to go somewhere else. I presume they would go to the parking lot directly to the north of my property, and when that's finished and built. And for them to go from that parking lot to the wine bar, they either have to walk around all the sidewalks all the way around the block, which I doubt very few people would, but otherwise they would have to walk on private property. They would either have to walk on the Schmidt's Law Office property or my backyard. And so for that reason, I have just a little concern about that. I have talked to Ron Reeder about having some kind of a border between my property and that parking lot. And hopefully we'll be able to resolve that. I'm sure he will. We would like to do it in a very environmentally looking way, a green space of some kind, perhaps with some arborvitaes or something like that. But that would be the avenue which overflow parking might possibly go. And I'm not an old prude. If somebody walks through my yard, I'm not going to be overly upset. But certainly, I thought you ought to know that that could be an issue should the amount of patrons at the property be in excess of the parking that they have, because that would be the only place that people could get to the bar. And so for that reason, I just thought I'd present that to you. Again, I want to say I'm not against the occupancy. I don't think it's going to be that kind of a disruptive factor to a residential area, although I know my residential area is zoned commercial, so I'm fully aware of that too. But just to make you aware of the parking issue could be something you might look at.
Thank you. And your name, sir?
John Scher, 106 South Franklin Street.
Thank you, John. And what we'll do is we'll see if there's other questions regarding this issue, and then When we close the public hearing, then we'll respond to any concerns that were raised. Is there anyone else in the audience that wishes to speak under the public comment on this item? Anyone else? I always go 3 times, and that's your final time. Anyone else that wishes to speak on this agenda item? Not seeing any, I would accept the motion then to close the public hearing. We have a motion by Mr. Horsfall. Is there a second? Second. Seconded by Mr. Lytle. All those in favor of closing the public hearing signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. And that motion carries. So we are now on agenda item 4A, which is discussion and possible action regarding the CUP that we just heard. If we were to take action this evening, it would be a recommendation to the Common Council. Mr. Sayre, anything that you wish to add?
Yes. So the property at 103 South Main is the yellow shaded here. I believe Mr. Scher's property is the one right there. If that's, yes, he's nodding his head yes. So just for, we all know what we're talking about. The existing businesses at 103 South Main include Frona Liquor, Gucci Poochie, and then also the Ginkgo tree. This would be the last remaining vacant space in that building. The property itself has approximately 13 parking spaces. The property is zoned central commercial, so there are no parking requirements in the central commercial zoning district. It's consistent with other businesses in the area. As Mr. Scher indicated, that the city did purchase the 2 properties on the corner here, in the northwest corner of Park and Franklin, this past year and the year before. We did demolish the houses this fall, and we'll be constructing a municipal parking lot at that location first thing in the spring. You know, I tend to agree with him that there could potentially be people cutting through there. I don't disagree with that. I'm not sure if you're aware, Mr. Reeder is retiring on July 1st. So unfortunately, Ron's gonna be leaving, but I guess, you know, as we build that, the city would be happy to work with that property owner with looking at fencing out there, looking at shrubs and plantings of any type. You know, that's one thing that we've offered, and Ron and I have talked about this already. We'd be more than happy to do that from a staff level perspective of whatever you think would be appropriate out there. We're happy to work with you on that, you know, with the understanding that we are putting this in and we are potentially creating those issues on your property. So I guess as we build it, I would encourage, you know, the property owner there to work with Mr. Reeder, and then once Ron retires and we have whoever replaces Ron, if I can continue to work with you as potential issues come up, I'm more than happy to work with you on those. So I just want to be fully open regarding that. I agree there could potentially be some issues there, but let's just keep the communication open, and when there are problems do come up, let's talk about them. Let's figure out what we can do to solve them too. You know, long term, as the owner indicated, this area is planned for redevelopment. It is planned for additional commercial development in the future. So there will be some short-term issues here. I don't disagree with that, but long-term, this parking lot will be a benefit for this kind of quadrant of the downtown. But like I said, we're more than happy to work with the property owner to kind of address that. Staff comments just regarding the use itself. This is an ideal use for the downtown. One of the goals of downtown is to be a vibrant destination for residents and visitors. This is the type of use that will help create that vibrancy. We did go through the general and findings, specific and general findings of facts for conditional use permits. We find that it does meet all the requirements, so staff recommends the Plan Commission recommend to the Common Council approval of the conditional use permit to allow an indoor commercial entertainment land use known as Toot and Kate's Wine Bar to be located at 103 South Main.
Thank you, Mr. Sayre. Questions or comments from Plan Commission members? Are there any questions or Mr. Manley, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thinking about the parking issue and the construction of the municipal lot, would there be an opportunity to direct pedestrian traffic from that parking lot through the little thoroughfare that's in between Avanti's and that law office? Would that be, could you pull that off without a trespassing situation?
Mr. Sayre?
So the law office is owned by Tom Schmidt. Mr. Schmidt and I have met on a few different occasions and discussed this issue. I've actually inquired about potentially an easement of some type to allow pedestrian traffic through there, with the understanding the city would maintain the easement. We'd plow it, we'd shovel it, we'd do everything that would go along with that. I think Mr. Schmidt is concerned about still with liability out there. You know, we've offered to take all liability, and I think he still has concerns potentially that if we would even allow that under whatever type of easement or whatever type of situation, he could potentially still be liable if something happened on his property. I think he's also concerned long term if he sells that property and has an easement on it, just what type of financial impact would come to him. So it's a good idea. Unfortunately, we couldn't work that out.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Mr. Lytle, please.
Just related to general traffic flow, I see the aerial photo you used, Adam, still has those barricades between the Schmidt building and the multi-tenant building. I can't remember driving by there recently if those are still in place and what purpose those serve in terms of ownership of that driveway between the two properties.
Mr. Sayre?
So the yellow box, so this kind of yellow line here, that's actually the property line. So the yellow the barricades are located on the Schmidt's property, and those are still there. As of, I know, a few weeks ago, they were still there, so I suspect they're there today. But that is actually on Mr. Schmidt's property, and I think his intention is to keep people from, once again, possibly driving through there, possibly coming out and striking a pedestrian or striking a vehicle, or having a vehicle struck on his property and the potential of liability associated with that.
Thanks for refreshing my memory.
As of a couple days ago, I know they were still there because I looked. Other questions or comments on this agenda item? If not, we would be prepared to take action. What is the wish of the Planning Commission? Mr. Horsfall?
This time I'd like to recommend to the Common Council approve the conditional use permit to allow the indoor commercial entertainment land use known as Toot and Kate's Wine Bar to be located at 103 South Main Street.
We have a motion by Mr. Horsfall. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Manley. Questions or comments on the motion to recommend to the council? I would just repeat the comment that we heard and the concern from Mr. Scherer, and we will relay that to the council when we meet next week, Monday night. And yeah, I agree with Mr. Sayre that the city will be monitoring that. Seeing no other questions or comments, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. That motion carries, and that will be on the council for Monday evening. Next, we have a public hearing on a conditional use permit for a proposed indoor commercial entertainment land use known as Fitness in the 608 to be located at 807 Liberty Drive. Do I have a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
We have a motion by Mr. Manley. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Horsfall. All in favor of opening the public hearing signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried. We are in the public hearing stage. Mr. Sayre, you want to provide some background, please?
Yes, the applicant's requesting a conditional use permit to operate indoor commercial entertainment land use at 807 Liberty Drive. This would be a fitness center, a personal training and fitness studio. This would be located in the first Flex building within Liberty Business Park. The zoning ordinance requires all conditional use permits to have a public hearing before the Plan Commission. As part of that, we did notify all property owners within 200 feet of this request, and this would be a recommendation to the Common Council.
Thank you, Mr. Sayre. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak on this agenda item? Is there anyone that wishes to speak on this agenda item? Your final opportunity. Anyone who wishes to speak on this agenda item? Seeing none, I would accept the motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
We have a motion by Mr. Manley. Is there a second? I'll second. Second by Mr. Heinzen. All in favor of closing the public hearing signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. That motion carries. We are now on agenda item 5A, which, again, this item, if we were to take action, would be a recommendation to the Common Council. Mr. Sayre, please.
Thank you. Once again, this would be going in the first Flex building in Liberty Business Park. The first Flex building is located on the east side of Liberty Drive at the intersection of Liberty and Clarity. This would be located between the KSW construction offices and also in between, or to the south, would be the Infusion Mixed Martial Arts Studio. The applicant is proposing the hours of operations be Monday through Friday from 5:30 a.m. to 7 p.m. Tentatively, the applicant intends to occupy the space at the first of the year. Parking is provided on site, both parking in front of the building and in the rear. Staff analyzed the parking for all the uses in the space, and the site overall conforms to the parking requirements. If parking on this site becomes a problem, most likely employees of KSW and commercial recreational specialists will probably have to start parking in the rear of the building where there's sufficient parking and walking a little bit further. But staff doesn't anticipate any parking concerns out there just because of time of day demands that occur on the site. We did go through the specific and general conditional use permits findings of fact, and we believe it does meet the requirements. So that staff recommends the Plan Commission recommend the Common Council approval of the conditional use permit to allow indoor commercial entertainment land use known as Fitness in the 608 to be located at 807 Liberty Drive.
Thank you, Mr. Sayre. Are there any questions or comments from Planning Commission members? Mr. Horsfall, please.
With their hours that they're said, so if they want to help or have classes on Saturday or Sunday, does that mean they can't? Because they talk about a workshop also.
Mr. Sayre?
No, I mean, unless you want to condition the hours, they could still do it. I mean,
Okay.
we haven't, for this part of the city, we haven't regulated the hours because there aren't any houses there or residents.
I didn't want the hours be limited in their operation.
No, if you put it in a condition, then it would. But
Oh, okay.
Any other questions or comments on this agenda item? I'm not seeing any. Do we have any motions for potential recommendation to the Common Council? Mr. Manley?
I'll make a motion to approve or recommend approval of the conditional use permit as submitted.
We have a motion by Mr. Manley. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Lytle. Any questions or comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries. That will also be on the Common Council agenda for Monday evening. Next, we have agenda item 6, which is a public hearing on the general development plan for a planned unit development to allow for the construction of a mixed-use project containing 36 apartment units and 3,770 square feet of commercial space located at 142 Paoli Street. Before we do that, I know the gentleman's trying to close the door there, but we're required by state law. This is an open meeting, so we have to keep the room open to the public, so cannot close the door. Do we have a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
We have a motion by Mr. Manley. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Heinzen. All those in favor of opening the public hearing signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries. Mr. Sayre, please.
the request tonight is a general development plan for a planned unit development. This is a GDP, as it's called. This is the third step in the plan development process. Just for sake of discussion, the first step is a meeting with staff. The second step in the plan development process is a concept review that goes to the Plan Commission and Common Council for discussion only. This project at 142 Paoli Street had that conceptual review back in August, I believe. Third step is where we're at tonight with the general development plan. As part of that, we do notify all property owners within 200 feet. This item would be a recommendation to the Common Council. There is a fourth step after this if it does go forward. That is the precise implementation plan. That is the last step in the plan development process, and that is basically where all the full detailed plans are submitted for the project. For the sake of the public hearing, I'll just mention that I did receive some emails on this topic. I received an email from Stephen Karen Zimmerman opposing it. I also had an email from Susan Vaughn opposing the project. I also had Paul and Melody Ace at 139 Paoli Street opposing the project. And then I also had an email from Al and Julie Miller. And then we also received, and I believe the Plan Commission was copied on all these, a letter that was signed by, I don't know the exact count of neighbors in there, but a letter signed by the neighbors surrounding the project opposing it. So I think all those have been sent out to you during the course of the week. If you'd like me to read them in, I can, but I think for sake of time, I have them here if you'd like me to read them. So with that, that's all I have at this point, but tonight would be a recommendation to the Common Council.
Thank you, Mr. Sayre. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak on this agenda item? If you would, please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Plan Commission. My name is Tim Critter. I reside, or my office resides at 612 West Main Street, Madison, Wisconsin. And I appreciate your time here this evening. I represent TJK Design Build. We are the designers and proposed contractors for this development. And I also represent Mr. Bill Dresser here this evening. I'll be brief. As this community continues to grow and change, and with the exploding growth of Epic, new markets in Verona are emerging for real estate that offers a more convenient lifestyle. In so many communities, much like Verona, higher density mixed-use projects and developments are difficult to construct because of the zoning and building codes that favor low-density development and because of opposition from the community. The definition of density depends on the context in which it is used. Higher density means new residential and commercial development at a density that is higher than what is typically found in the community. How will it change the neighborhood? Will it make traffic worse? What will happen to the property values? And what about crime? Ample evidence suggests that well-designed higher density development becomes a significant community asset that adds to the quality of life and property values of existing residents while addressing the needs of growing and changing populations. Most people assume that higher density development generates more traffic. In fact, the opposite is true. Higher density developments can help reduce crime by increasing pedestrian activity and fostering a 24-hour community. Higher density development offers the best solution to managing growth and protecting clean air and clean water. Attractive, well-designed, and well-maintained higher density development attracts good residents and tenants and fits into existing communities. It's your neighbors. Higher density projects combine the best design ideas to provide residents with walkable, bikeable, and more dynamic communities to put residents closer to shops, work, and parks. No matter what it is in life, change is challenging. As the neighborhood has noted, this urban industrial site, now zoned urban residential, will be developed. This project will be the building block for good design to assure the continued success of this transitioning neighborhood. We are asking for your approval. We are asking you for the opportunity to realize a viable asset on this abandoned property, an asset owned and operated by a lifetime resident of Verona. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening. I'm John Bano. I'm with TJK Design Build as well. And I did the presentation for you earlier in August on the conceptual layout that we've done. I think Tim has done a nice job of sort of framing the complexities of a project like this. But I'd like to take this opportunity to step back and thank the people that have helped us get through the process to this point, namely staff. They have been very helpful with feedback and insight onto the project this far, and we expect nothing less as it moves forward. They've also been very good in helping to facilitate communication both with the neighborhood, alders, and everybody else associated with the project. I'd like to thank the neighbors. They've challenged us to make a better project. If you remember from the first time we presented to this project that you have in front of you today, the changes are fairly dramatic, not only in the architecture, the layout, the size of the buildings, the densities, they've all been improved. And then finally, Bill Dresser. He's a person with a driving vision to get this project done in a community that he has lived in almost all of his life. At this point, I could walk you through the architecture, the materials, the design, the details, but I'd rather just sort of sit back and listen to what people have to say and then respond. I found that that is a much better response and approach to take on a project like this. If you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, I will sit and listen. Thank you.
Mr. Heinzen, please.
If I could just ask one question real quickly. Where does Mr. Dresser live in connection with this parcel?
Mr. Dresser lives in the town of Verona,
Okay. Okay, thanks.
just outside on the city's outskirts.
Okay,
And he's lived there for either in the community when he was young, and then as he started a family, he moved to the town of Verona, but he has lived here and worked here all his life.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not seeing any other questions right now, so as we get through the public hearing, if there's questions from the alder, from the alders, from the planning commission members, we may call you back up.
Thank you.
If you would. Anyone else in the audience that wishes to speak on this agenda item? Is there anyone that wishes to speak?
Sciatic nerve. Hi, I'm Roger Roethlisberger. This is my wife, Chris. We reside at 138 Poli Street, right next to 142 Poli Street. We have been there for 28 years. I myself was born and raised in the Verona school system, as were my parents and both my children. I'm here to just say that I oppose this. We would be required to be the buffer between this project and the rest of the world. The bike trail is somewhat of a buffer. 9 Mile Road is somewhat of a buffer, but this project is looking right in our back window. To keep it brief, that's my statement. Our backyard would be a fishbowl to 14 balconies, 22 sets of patio doors, 38 operational windows, and 22 transom windows. We would be a fishbowl. All the things Mr. Critter said about crime and other concerns, I agree, are true. And this density is, well, I think it would overwhelm us. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the Planning Commission. First of all, thank you for what you do. I know it's probably a lot of headaches, especially when you get a room full of people that oppose a project. I want to start out by saying...
Tim, can you give your address, please?
Oh, I'm sorry, 143 Piola Street, which would be directly across the street from this project. I want to start out by saying we're what I consider a very proud residential neighborhood. We're not part of the downtown district, which has been noted from previous planning commission meetings. It's been stated that it is not part of the downtown district. So I think it's very important that we point that out. A proud residential neighborhood. Some of the neighbors that have lived there for 10, 20, 30, I think there's 6 residents of the neighborhood that have been there over 40 years. I just did my math real quick here. I believe there's 572 years of tax-paying people on Piola Street collectively, of the 26 residential addresses on Piola Street. So as you can see, there's a lot of proud people here that we're concerned about our neighborhood. My question for the developer and for the Planning Commission are as follows. Looking at the plan, why is there a future property line on page 22 of the plans that were submitted? A future property line to me means that when this was developed, there had to be some sort of future plan that this property was going to be split between the commercial aspect and the residential aspect. If that's true, I don't have the answers to that, but if that's true, the actual density would be increased substantially from the acre and a half or 1.6 acres to the guesstimate 1.1 acres. So then you're talking about 36 units on 1 acre. That is way too dense, way too dense. Another question I have for the Planning Commission and for the developers is the commercial properties. Currently today, there are 4 commercial properties on the south side of Verona. And the Planning Commission just approved one of them earlier. So my addresses that I looked at on the way today at 109, which you guys just approved for something that's gonna go in that place, 204, 251, and 303 South Main Street. Those are all vacant commercial properties. When I talked to Mr. Dresser a couple weeks ago, I asked him if he had any letters of intent for properties that are gonna go into that commercial property. At that time, he said no. So there's nobody that's looking to get in. Again, this was a couple weeks ago. There's no letters of intent for people to go into that commercial property. Verona does not need, in my opinion, Verona doesn't need commercial property surrounded by residential property on the south side of Verona that's not part of the downtown district. Also, that could pull away potential customers from the downtown district if it's down on the south side of Verona. My other question, why do we triple the density, potentially triple the density for residents? Again, density is way too high. Some other questions for the developers. Who is the management company? Has there been a management company been selected for this high density residential property? If there has been one, what kind of track record does this management company have? And my final concern, which I think really needs to be addressed, is public safety. Mr. Critter talked about public safety and how it would increase public safety. I adamantly disagree with that. And I would ask the commission, or the Planning Commission, to talk to the police chief, the fire chief, and the EMS chief. It's proven that higher density neighborhoods are a burden on public safety. That's right across the street from myself and many of these neighbors in the neighborhood. I ask you, please, talk to the police chief and get his opinion. The fire chief, the EMS chief, get your opinion on public safety in high density neighborhoods. It'll be a lot different answer than Mr. Critter supplied to you. In closing, thank you for your time. Once again, we're a proud residential neighborhood, and we want to stay that way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hagan. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak?
Good evening. My name's Al Miller. I live at 315 Thompson Street. We also, my wife and I, own the adjoining property at 136 Piola Street to this project. The back half of our property directly adjoins 142 Piola Street. And we have concerns. I wrote a kind of a long-winded email that all of you should have received that laid out some of my thoughts. And I guess I want to go on record as saying I don't think we personally are opposed to a project going on this property, and I'm not sure that the neighborhood is, but we're looking for a project that fits the neighborhood, I guess. As you know, in 2013 there was a different proposal which probably met with some concerns of the neighborhood, but was approved and never got off the ground. Personally, I feel that was a lot better designed project because it kept the apartment building and the commercial space at the back of the lot near the bike trail, and became a, there was more green space, if you will, between the building proper and the neighborhood. And obviously it was a lot less dense project. The density obviously is a major concern, I think, to everyone in the neighborhood. And I have to be honest up front too in saying the property at 136 PLA Street we purchased 5 years ago. It was, if you're familiar with it, it was kind of a blighted property at the time. It was run down, overgrown, several tons of scrap metal in the backyard and so forth. And we cleaned it up. It's a 2-flat. It's a rental property. It's always been rented, and we are pretty proud of the renters we've had. I don't think we've had renters that have created any issues in the neighborhood. We try to be pretty careful about who we rent to. And I have to be honest in saying that part of the reason we bought that is that this 2-unit is on almost a full acre, and so someday we thought it could be developed. So I'm not here to say we don't want anything in our backyard. I don't think any of the neighbors necessarily want to come off that way, but I think we're just asking for a good project that fits the neighborhood. And I think density of, it started out at 43 and has been tapering down to now 36 is the latest number. But obviously with the proposed lot line they're on their plans, it makes us wonder, if the density, if we should be talking about a 12-unit apartment building, if it's 2 separate buildings, or if it even should be 2 separate buildings. I think in some ways, if you're considering splitting the property, then is that really even mixed use, or should that be split and then you talk about developing 2 separate projects? And would the Plan Commission and the Council look at it the same way? I obviously share Tim Hagan's concerns with the concerns of density. Despite what Mr. Critter said, is I think we're concerned about higher density and the impact on the neighborhood, because there is going to be more traffic, there's going to be more vehicles, there's going to be more pedestrian traffic, there's going to be more of everything, and it's going to cause some issues. And that's obviously part of the reason why there are density rules, I believe. So within reason, I guess I would ask the question, on what basis do you grant exceptions? I realize in the downtown planning district, or whatever the term is, it may not have the exact terminology right, but there's been exceptions granted there for higher density, with good cause, because it's closer to downtown. And I've heard this project called a bookend of that one, but in between is residential. So I don't know if we want to be creating a bookend, in a residential area. Granted, maybe all of downtown Verona, 10 blocks all directions from the stoplight that's there now will be developed someday, but it's not now, and it'll be a long time before that happens. So can't throw the baby out with the bathwater here and ignore what is already there and has been a long established neighborhood. From a personal perspective, I also have a few concerns that are addressed in my letter that you received. One being stormwater drainage, because our property sits several feet lower than this property that's going to be developed, and I realize the city will address those issues in the planning stages with retention ponds and so forth. But any concern of stormwater is a concern for us, because in the 5 years that we've owned the property, we've completely regraded around the house, and to try and improve drainage, as well as put in a 3-foot French drain in the back. And we still have standing water anytime there's any amount of significant rain. So it's obviously a low area, so we can't take any runoff from that direction. Another concern is the setback of the proposed 3-story apartment building, which originally was 7 feet. I know it's been moved south a little bit now. I don't know what the exact setback from the north lot line is now, where it adjoins us. But however much they moved it, I don't think it's going to be, far enough for, to appease me, probably, is maybe the way I should say that. But I don't know how you address that either. I know we talked about some screening with arborvitaes or something like that. I don't know if there's going to be room to even do that in that space, frankly. And I also have concerns about our property, since the building on our property is up on Piola Street. we have a beautiful 3/4 acre backyard there that's like a park, huge mature walnut trees and so forth. And that's gonna make a beautiful park for all the residents of this apartment building and their dogs, which I'm not thrilled about, so. I would encourage you that the only way I see to try and address some of those issues would be a privacy fence the entire length of our adjoining property line there in order to consider approval of this property. Obviously, you know, there's other aesthetic issues of the building and so forth. I think the city will address those, but I think just the nature of this project and the commercial space being up on Pioli Street, in my opinion, seems to kind of put that in the middle of a residential area, including the apartment building being put behind it, because it really, other than the kitty corner to the AST property, has no adjoining commercial property and never will at that point. And so I don't know if it makes sense to put commercial all the way up on Pioli Street, or if we should be looking at a project that's got a better design like the first one did, and obviously the density issue. So I don't know if anybody has any direct questions for me.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Miller.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience that wishes to speak? Is there anyone else that wishes to speak? Third and final opportunity. Anyone that wishes?
All right, I am Bill Dressler, one of the owners of the property. And
Bill, can you state your address, please?
I live at 2110 Davis Hills Drive in the town of Verona. I did grow up in the city of Verona, 204 Melody Lane, if that means anything. Anyway, I guess I'd just like to give you a little playback on where we've been with this project. It's been ongoing for about 4 years. This is kind of our second attempt. I think, you know, we did a lot of things initially that I think everybody was somewhat pleased with, getting the zoning changed to residential. I don't think anybody complained about that. And I think when we tore the house down, it was infested with bats and rats and bees. Nobody was complaining about that either. Now we're trying to find the best use for this property and to make it cash flow where it's viable for, you know, the owners obviously and any investors, and the banks have to approve the pro forma and things like that. It's just got to work financially for us. So that kind of did bring the density up. The commercial aspect of the project was a tough sell down on the bike path, as much as I liked that and the neighborhood liked it. That was good for about 6 months out of the year. The commercial people that were looking at that space, several of them mentioned that it would do much better up on Pioli Street where there was more vehicle traffic past their front door. So that's why we made the decision to move it back up on the corner there to see if we could get more interest from the commercial people. That being said, it was never our intention to lower anybody's property value or cause any problems in the neighborhood. I really like this neighborhood myself, and we thought we were actually trying to improve it. So I'm a little disheartened by the negativity that's being spoken here, but I do understand the people that live nearby are going to be impacted by it. And I guess I stated this from the get-go, we want to work with them and try to make it a win-win. And we will work with them. So that's all I would say, I guess.
Thank you, Mr. Dresser. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak? Anyone else that wishes to speak? Anyone else that wishes to speak on this agenda item? Seeing no one, I would ask for a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
We have a motion by Mr. Horsfall. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Manley. All those in favor of closing the public hearing signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. The public hearing is closed. Mr. Sayre, if you would, please.
Thank you. So, as I think everyone alluded to, there was a previously approved plan development on this site that the city did approve in 2013. That project would have allowed for the construction of a single building with 24 apartment units and approximately 4,600 square feet of restaurant space. That project did not go forward, obviously. It made it as far as the step 3 process, so basically the same step that we're at tonight. I know after that kind of project, you know, the owner and I probably spoke every few months trying to discuss it and see where it's at. I know kind of what Bill was explaining tonight. That's the conversation that we had a few times of just the difficulty trying to fill that commercial space. As part of that 23 plan development, the city did rezone this property from urban industrial to urban residential. Our urban residential is our multifamily zoning district. We rezoned it back in 2013 to accommodate the mixed use and apartment component of the project. Currently with this project, the applicant is proposing 36 units, 36 unit apartment building along the bike trail. That'll be parallel to the bike trail, and we'd also have a approximately 3,700 square foot commercial building at the intersection of Paoli and Nine Mound. The Plan Commission had a concept review of this project in August 2015. Comments from the Plan Commission were included concerns about the building architecture at that time, the density being too high, and there was support at that time for splitting the project into 2 buildings. The Common Council also discussed this project in August. Comments from the council included concerns about the density, improving the architectural appearance of the building, questions about traffic from the development, and also questions about how this project fits within the downtown plan. Since that meeting, I know the applicant has had 2 neighborhood meetings. Architectural changes to the building have been made, and the commercial building has been reduced from the concept the Plan Commission reviewed at 6,200 square feet. It's been reduced to 3,700 square feet. Kind of, as I said initially, we are in the plan development process. It's a 4-step process. This is the 3rd step in that process. This would be a recommendation to the council tonight. The intent of Plan Development District is to provide incentives for infill development and redevelopment in areas of the community that are experiencing a lack of significant reinvestment. And this is from the ordinance. Further, PUDs are designed to forward both aesthetic and economic development objectives of the city by controlling the site design and appearance, density, and intensity of the development in terms of more flexible requirements for land uses. In exchange for flexibility, PUDs shall provide a much higher level of site design, architectural control, and other aspects of aesthetic and functional excellence that normally required for other developments. So it's intended to be a give and take process where a developer is asking for exceptions. The Plan Commission Council should weigh those exceptions based upon the public benefits and also the kind of higher quality design that is being achieved as part of the process. From a design and bulk standpoint review, we'll briefly go through this. The building along Paoli Street and Nine Mound would be set back approximately 21 feet from Paoli and 21 feet from Nine Mound Road. The side yard setback to the house here would be approximately 17 feet, and the building height would be 16 feet. The commercial component project of this requires exemptions from the ordinance for the front yard setbacks and also the side yard setbacks. There is a 50-foot setback because the property is zoned urban residential. Because of that zoning district, I guess non-residential land uses require larger setbacks. The 3-story apartment project, that would require at least 2 setback exemptions. The first one would be from the south property line off the corner here. They're requesting a 12-foot setback. The code requires 25 feet. And also from the north property line right here, the code requires 25 feet. Currently, the apartment building is 16 feet from that property line. The building height of the actual apartment building does conform to the ordinance requirements. It's at 35 feet, and it does meet that requirement. Density, as I think a few people have said tonight, the zoning ordinance allows up to 12 dwelling units per acre, and that's per the requirements of the urban residential zoning district. The applicant is requesting an exemption to the density at approximately 23 units per acre. The lot size is actually 1.56 acres. It's very similar in size from a lot standpoint to our city center project, which is located downtown. And kind of, I guess, looking at density of this project and other projects in the area, the first project there is the Velocity project. That was the project that was approved 2 years ago and never was built. That had a density of approximately 15.38 dwelling units per acre. The 2 apartment projects in Scenic Ridge had a density of under 12 units per acre. The Murray Glen development, that is the project north of Pasquale's that has 108 market rate apartment units and 111 units of senior housing. That's at 26 dwelling units per acre. And I should point out, these calculations are just rough on my part of just clicking in the parcel, getting the acreage, and then breaking out the units. So that does not include roads that were dedicated as part of the project, stormwater ponds that were dedicated, et cetera, et cetera. Sienna Ridge Apartments, those are in Harmony Hills on North Main Street. That has a density of 18.36 dwelling units per acre. The West End Apartments, which is now owned by Steve Brown Apartments, that has a density of 40 dwelling units per acre. And then we have the City Center Condos, which is just, I guess, kind of up the bike trail. That is a density of approximately 18 dwelling units per acre. And the calculation of 1.55 acres includes the condos and the Vision Center property, those properties combined, even though they are separate parcels. I should point out the asterisks on this. Anything with an asterisk is a planned unit development. That is something that the city has approved as part of that planned development process. So anything that has that asterisk, and pretty much most of the projects on here except Scenic Ridge have been approved as a planned development. Excuse me. From a parking standpoint, the applicant is proposing 80 parking stalls. That would include 44 surface parking stalls and 36 underground parking spaces. The zoning ordinance requires 75 parking spaces for the apartment land use and a minimum of 13 spaces for the commercial space. Like any development, when we don't have the end users identified in the commercial property, we can't perform a precise parking calculation. But at a minimum, it would have to have at least 13 spaces. So the applicant is requesting an exemption from that. Similar to the Velocity project, staff does believe parking on the site would work and function. It would need to be shared. I think due to time of day demands that you'd have the commercial building most likely being used during the day, the apartment project most likely being used more at night. So staff doesn't really have any concerns with the overall number. We feel that it's sufficient and it will work. One specific comment that we have shared with the architect is there are 4 parking spaces in the underground parking structure that we have concerns with. Those are the 2 spaces as you come in and the 2 spaces at the very end of the actual structure itself. Those are spaces that are difficult to back out of. They're pretty tight to get in and out of. And we would request that modifications be made to those spaces so you'd have more of a, like similar to this area where you have a vehicle turnaround area to back into so you could easily back out of that. There are 3 access points planned to the site, 3 access points off of 9 Mountain Road. 2 of the access points would serve the surface parking lot. The northernmost point would serve the underground parking structure. Staff has no concerns with the access at this time. Stormwater management plans have been submitted and will be reviewed as part of the precise implementation plan. The applicant is proposing two basins, one behind the building and also one kind of to the east of the apartment building. A complete review of that will be completed at a later date. Landscaping plans are also included in your submittal. Once again, staff has not completed, we haven't done a complete review on that. One item that we'll recommend as part of the precise implementation plan is for the applicant to have board-on-board fencing along the side and the rear property line with 138 Paoli Street. We'd recommend that along this property line and also the back property line as well to screen that property better from potential headlight glare. Signage, there was a conceptual monument sign shown on the plan. Building signage was not provided. We do have a condition of approval that we would recommend if the Plan Commission decides to recommend this tonight. Relating to the signage, basically what it would say is that any signage on the property would have to conform to dark sky standards. This is a residential neighborhood, and just making sure that sign, if there is signage, that it's not overpowering anything in the area. So it'd have to be basically backlit from the inside, and you'd only have the logo appearing and not lighting the whole white face of the sign itself. But we do have specific language that we've used elsewhere that we think could be appropriate for this site. Architecturally, the commercial building itself will be single-story and have a pitched roof to blend with the residential buildings in the area. Proposed materials will include split-face block, brick, precast stone, and smart siding. Staff, we have no concerns with the architecture at this time. We think it's going to be a nice looking building. The colors of the building would include earth tones and would blend with the apartment project as well. I think it's come a significant long way since we first saw this project, I don't know how many months ago. So staff has no concerns with the commercial project at this time from an architectural standpoint. The multifamily building will be similar and kind of blend the style of the commercial building. It has a similar look to the city center condo project that's located in downtown. The ends will be 2-story and the middle part will be 3-story, so they will be stepped back on the ends. Materials of this would include brick and smart siding. Many of the units in this project, in this building as well, would have balconies. Staff does appreciate that the applicant has kind of stepped the buildings on the ends. And at this time, we don't really have any concerns with the architecture of the building. It looks pretty nice, and it's very similar, to, like I said, to the city center project nearby. The comprehensive plan, the Verona Comprehensive Plan encourages infill development and new development and redevelopment in the downtown area. As I've said before, this project is not in the downtown plan. It was not included in that plan. However, I mean, this project, I think long-term and looking at, how the city develops and redevelops, it may make sense to take a look at this project for redevelopment due to the fact that it's approximately 1/3 of a mile from what I would call the core of the city. That's the downtown at Main Street there. I think, obviously short-term as redevelopment happens, there will be concerns and issues that will arise. But I think long-term, if the city is trying to create that critical mass in the downtown, trying to create a vibrant downtown, you need people. And right now, we don't have many good sites in our downtown for redevelopment. That's just the reality. I mean, we don't have any large sites. We don't have any acre-and-a-half sites that are readily available for redevelopment. So I think from a long-term standpoint, this site does make sense for some type of redevelopment to occur on it. The city does have a residential phasing policy. We adopted that policy in 2012, and what that does is it establishes a target range for the city to approve multifamily projects each year at a range of 25 to 50 units each year. There are 3 exceptions to that policy. One exception is the senior housing. Second exception is downtown redevelopment, and a third exception to that is mixed-use projects. Currently, the city has 0 multifamily units allocated in 2016, so if the council were to decide to approve this project, it wouldn't need an exemption. But if they felt they wanted to apply the exemption to that, they could do that as well too. The commercial uses, the applicant has indicated the hours of operations of that building would be from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. The staff recommends if that's feels right to the Plan Commission that we have that as a condition of approval of the project. I think from a staff level comment standpoint, let me put this one up too. Staff supports the redevelopment on this parcel. As I've said before, this project is located approximately 1/3 of a mile from South Main Street. I think due to the close proximity to downtown, the proposed density may be appropriate to provide a larger critical mass to the downtown area. Staff finds the proposed project is probably a better fit to the neighborhood than developing this property originally as urban industrial. With that said, one comment that staff has kind of outstanding is regarding the density. Staff has asked the developer to take a look at that, and staff believes a density of 28 to 32 units per acre, which is a density of 18 to 20 units per acre overall, is more appropriate for this project due to the location and due to the neighbors in the existing area, these existing single-family homes. It'd also be a better match for the city center project, which is kind of very similar in size to this and very similar in look to this. We also think that's also an appropriate range based on the fact that we did approve 24 units on this. I think a range of 28 to 32 would be appropriate to the site. So that staff recommends the following Plan Commission action. The Plan Commission recommend approval of the general development plan located at 142 Paoli Street with the following conditions. 1, any internal illuminated signs or any other signs with internal illumination or indirect light from the back of the letters or signs shall not produce any glare. Internally illuminated signs displaying an illuminated copy shall be designed in such a way so that when illuminated, the sign appears to have light-colored copy on a dark, non-illuminated background. If you look at the Sitco sign by Vincenzo Plaza, that's an example of that type of sign. 2, the businesses located within the commercial building shall operate between the hours of 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. 3, the commercial land uses located in the neighborhood building shall conform to allowable uses located in the neighborhood commercial zoning district. Those are just generally uses of office and professional services, just ensuring that you don't have high-intensity commercial land uses occurring at this site. And 4, the number of apartments units shall be reduced to 32 units. I think before I'm done, I'll address on a couple questions that were raised tonight. I think the first one was regarding the property line on page 22. I know the applicant and I have we spoke about that and discussed that, that was kind of why that was on the plans. My understanding from speaking with the architect was that's intended as a potential placeholder if there was a user identified for that commercial space who needed to purchase the building or acquire the building. That was the intent of saying, basically showing this is how the property could be submitted in the future. I will point out that any CSMs, any land divisions on this property would have to be approved by the city. So even if it's conceptually shown on there, it would still have to come back through that certified survey map process and be approved by the Common Council. But my understanding from speaking with the architect was that was just a potential of if there was the right user in that commercial building who wanted to buy it, that they potentially would look at splitting that off. Regarding I think the question of we have a lot of vacant commercial in the city. I know Mr. Hagan and I have spoke about this a couple times, and I don't see eye to eye on that one. I know we do have some vacancies in the city. I think if the basis of approving any new commercial development is the city has to be 100% occupied, we probably won't approve anything. I think to his point, there is a balance of how much you want to have and where it should be located, but I don't believe there's a glut in the city right now. I think if anything, the ones that are vacant may be vacant for certain reasons that are outside of our control right now. Regarding the density, I think I've spoken to that. Regarding the management company, I'll defer that one, I guess, to the architect. Public safety, I guess to that comment, we do discuss these projects as staff. We do have staff meetings every other week. As part of that, the police chief, fire chief are invited to those meetings. I have not heard any comments regarding this project from the police chief or fire chief. I have not reached out to them specifically to talk about this project, but they are invited to those meetings and they do attend occasionally. So, but I have not had any comments directly from them at those meetings or outside those meetings myself. I guess I'll defer to Mr. Gunluck on the stormwater questions. And I guess regarding does it make sense to put commercial on Paoli Street? I think it's a valid question. The question is if the commercial goes away, then you just have an apartment building. I think one of the intentions of staff, and I'm just going to be clear here, is that when apartment projects come forward, we try to direct people to the downtown. We try to direct people to have mixed-use development, and we try to direct people for senior housing. We have a policy in place that those are the exceptions, and those are, I guess, in essence, incentives for those developers because they don't have to deal with the phasing of actual those projects then. I mean, I think it's a question long-term, how we see Paoli Street, what's the vision for that road and also Nine Mountain Road. It's not a terribly busy street, but it does have some traffic on it. It's at an intersection as well too. But the question is, if you drop the commercial part of this, or I'm not sure how it impacts the project, but the intent of that policy was to encourage this type of development that does have a mixed-use component to it. So I'll just say that from a staff level perspective that that's how I read that policy of we've got 3 things we're trying to encourage in the city. That's how I see kind of this project and other projects going forward in the future. But it is a fair question of how it works at Paoli Street. I will say that along the bike trail is challenging. I don't think you'll ever attract a restaurant there that would be viable long term. I think potentially, and Mr. Dresser and I have talked about this before, looking at other users in there that could be possible, but once again, they want that visibility. I mean, any real estate broker is going to say they want it. People driving down the road want to see the business. They want to see the sign to draw people in. So that, I guess I'll defer to Mr. Gunlock if he has any comments on the stormwater.
Mr. Gunlock, if you would, please.
I guess as far as the stormwater, all I'll say is we do have the report. We were waiting to see what the Plan Commission did tonight with this, and after depending on what happens tonight, we will then review the stormwater report and either approve it or ask for revisions.
Thank you. So with that, we are open to questions, comments, potential motions. And if we were to take action on this, this is again an item that would be a recommendation to the Common Council. Mr. Heinzen, please.
Thank you. I have a couple questions for Mr. Sayre. I was not here in August, so I did not get the opportunity to see this the last time it was before us. I was here 2 years ago, and my recollection is, and I think it was clear for the Plan Commission at the time, as well as the neighborhood, that what had been proposed with the 24 units was seen as a real, it would have been it would have been an asset to the community. And I'll get to the question here in just a second, but what I do see is the issue, two issues. One is whether or not commercial should be where it is, and whether or not the density is too great. And in connection, I guess I'd start, what can be built on that site right now without a conditional use permit?
Mr. Sayre, please.
Without a conditional use permit? Let me look that up. What's the next question?
Okay.
Let me look it up.
Could an apartment building be built there so long as it didn't exceed the 12 units per acre?
No.
Okay.
No, yeah, any multifamily project in the city, regardless of the location, well, it's gotta be zoned UR, but it takes a conditional use permit.
Okay.
We changed that code, I believe, back in 2012 with that phasing policy.
Okay. And the next question I have is the development of Paoli Street. And this is, again, just to, I guess, for my own edification as well as others in the room. Is it the plan long-term that all of the homes on Paoli Street, as they become, I don't know, available, or as a developer would purchase a property, the homes would be either converted to a commercial property, or they would be removed into commercial property, put in that place?
Mr. Sayre, please.
All right, well, first, let me go back to your first question of what could be done there without any approvals right now. The applicant could build a duplex, they could build a townhouse there, you could cultivate the land. You could have a community living arrangement of 1 to 8 residents or 9 to 15 residents. You could also have a community living arrangement. So pretty much duplex, townhouse, community living arrangement up to 15 people.
Okay. Are you aware of any plans for any other commercial along Paoli Street in the next, has anybody come to the city to talk about any other commercial changes along Paoli Street?
No.
Until that happens, until there, and maybe this would be the first commercial property that would get the ball rolling on this, but one can imagine that there would not be additional commercial on Paoli Street for some period of time. And it strikes me that, at least at the outset, that whether or not the commercial property would succeed or not is not going to be dependent upon whether it's on Paoli Street or if it's on 9 Mound. It's a destination. There is no commercial property there. I can see long-term why it would not be a destination, but so long as it's the only commercial on all of Paoli Street, I don't see how it's anything other than just it's a destination place that people would have to know about. It's not going to survive by drive-by, people going to this commercial area. And with all the residential homes on Paoli Street, it makes sense for me, at least, that the commercial property would be adjacent to or on 9 Mound Road, as opposed to right at the edge of Paoli Street, along with all the homes. And I guess I have one more comment with respect to the density. And what troubles me a little bit with the density is that when the project was before us in 2013 and zoning had to change from urban industrial to urban residential, the conversation at the time with the neighbors, with the Plan Commission was, hey, we're going to make this change to the zoning, and it's going to be a 24-unit apartment building with commercial on the bottom. would that have happened? Would we have been willing to make that change if we would have had a project of the size that now appears before us? And so I don't know where I fall on, you know, moving the number of apartments down to 32. It's better than it first showed up with us in August, but the density still concerns me for the way in which the neighborhood, I guess, supported the change in 2013 to the zoning.
Thank you, Mr. Heinzen. Other questions, comments? Mr. Lytle, please.
We might as well work down the line here. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Adam, thank you for your report. Some of your recommended conditions for approval I concur with. So I'll start with some specific comments on the plan and then move to a little bit bigger picture. I do agree that some sort of privacy fence, if this project moves forward, especially where the property is adjacent to another home, is a requirement that almost has to be there. I like the idea of vegetative screening, but I know the limitations of that, especially early on. As I look along Paoli Street, I do see commercial and industrial property as we get farther out of town, as you move to the southwest, I guess, on the compass, especially on the northwest side of that street. So if a plan were to come back, I'm not completely opposed to the idea of having a commercial component to this. If it's going to be there, and if what makes it viable is some sort of frontage along Paoli, I would recommend the developer look at rotating that building so the greater frontage is along 9 Mound, which moves it farther away from the residential property. There's less frontage, I realize that's the downside along Paoli, and then you seek to have a better buffer between the building, parking, and that single-family home just to the northeast. In general, I definitely believe density should come down. I was not here for the preliminary review of the concept plan, but my recommendation in terms of trying to make something of a scale that makes sense without exceeding the character of the neighborhood completely is looking at 24 to 28 units. Again, all dependent on how it fits into the overall big picture. Those are some specific comments, and this sort of goes along with the discussion we'll have for Candinas as well. Over my time on the Plan Commission, I've struggled with what purpose do we serve between the developers who want to come in with a proposal that makes the most economic sense for them and that they believe has the highest chance of being successful. We have staff who work every day in this and have expertise that we on the Plan Commission don't have. And finally, we have a city council that I can't tell them what their duties are, but I believe they have to look at proposals like this and weigh, are the downsides and the negative impacts potential to the neighborhood worth the upsides and the positive impacts in the greater community? So where does the Plan Commission fit into all that? I think if you'd look in general, Plan Commissions are in charge of looking at land use. We try to promote some consistency in terms of long-range planning that the city does. So as presented tonight, to sum it up, as presented tonight, I'm not in favor of the idea as presented. I believe there is a version of this that I could get behind as a Plan Commission member. But in terms of the positive and negative influence on the community, I look to our city council to be informed as we see city council members here this evening and vote on this when the time comes. But that being said, open to the ideas, but have some very specific concerns as it exists right now and not comfortable supporting it.
Thank you, Mr. Lytle. Other questions, comments? Mr. Horsfall?
We'll go down the line. I agree with what Patrick says. Again, in the August meeting, I was against what the density was. And so again, it's reducing it by a little bit is okay, but, you know, it's zoned 12 acres per, 12 units per acre. That's kind of what I'm looking for is, you know, going to fit into the neighborhood and everything like that. So, and the other points that Patrick made most eloquently, I'd have to say. I agree with that also. So I can't support it at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Horsfall. Other questions, comments? Mr. Manley, please.
I don't want to break the chain here. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a few comments and maybe a question. But I guess it starts for me with just kind of the fundamental concern that we have a very well-established neighborhood, residential neighborhood here, with people who have invested a lot of money in the upkeep of what I think is a very nice neighborhood in our city, and the two houses on the same side of Paoli Street that are most adjacent to this that I would argue are the most affected are, you know, very nice investments, very well-maintained property, and I just don't feel like anybody who's invested in this neighborhood has ever had fair notice from the city that there could be a hugely dense multifamily development happen on their street. And we've had, for as long as I've been on the Plan Commission and for the 6 years that I was on the City Council, we've had numerous debates about the controversy surrounding putting dense multifamily into a single-family neighborhood. And I don't think it's a good idea to do that. But when you do it, I think you need to do it at the beginning of a neighborhood development so that everybody who decides to build there can do so with their eyes wide open and knowing that, okay, I'm going to build my home in this neighborhood and I know that they're going to put an apartment building there, as we've done with Scenic Ridge and as we've done with other parts of the city where we have both single-family residences and very dense apartment buildings. And that's just not the case here. And so I really struggle to come to the conclusion that it makes sense to put something this dense on this property. What would otherwise be in a different part of the city, I think a very, very nice development. I mean, I think there's a lot here to like about what's going on with the plan, but not at this location. I have a hard time myself viewing this project as a mixed-use project because when I look at the apartment complex and when I look at the retail building, there's very little that they have in common other than a gigantic asphalt parking lot that runs between them. So for me as a Plan Commission member to think about this in terms of being a mixed-use development, I just don't get there. I see this as a retail project and an apartment complex separately. And I think the fact that there's a consideration, at least the possible consideration of doing a property division to divide the two of them sort of puts a fine point on that. So I can't support this project. I agree with what Mr. Lytle said about the positioning of the commercial. As I look at the site plan and I see the bioretention basin along Nine Mound, I mean, if this project was going to move forward in any form with a much less dense profile, I would see that as a more appropriate location for the commercial aspect of this. But I you know, I guess I just, at this time, I can't, I just can't support this kind of a large format multifamily on this property.
Thank you, Mr. Manley. My comments are very much along the lines of Mr. Lytle's, and I agree, he said it very eloquently. My concern is mainly regarding the density. And I want to see this property developed. I think that would be a good thing. I don't really have an issue with commercial development on the property as well. It really comes down to the density for me. And I would say the same thing if this were in other parts of the city. Part of my personal philosophy is that I prefer single-family homes over multifamily. And I understand that we need to have some multifamily in the city, but I believe that for the long-term good of the city, that when you have single-family homes and ownership, you have people that are more committed to the community. And that's really, really important to me. So, again, I'd like to see the property developed, what the appropriate level is as far as the density. You know, I think we can take a look at that. I think that what's being proposed here is probably a little on the high side. And what my recommendation would be to the Planning Commission is that we do not take any action on this evening, but we ask the developer to come back, to work with staff, and if they so desire, to come back. We could do that as a Planning Commission, or we could take no action and have it on the council agenda for next week, Monday, and see what the city council does. But I heard from some of the folks that even that came up and spoke in opposition tonight, that they're not necessarily opposed to that property being developed, but it's mainly, excuse me, mainly the issue of the density. So that's just my thought, and I'd like to know what my colleagues on the Planning Commission think. Mr. Horsfall?
So if we took no action, it's still going to be an agenda item on the council?
Mr. Sayre?
I'd recommend a motion if you're going to forward it off in some fashion. It is a recommendation to the council. So if you want to, basically you can recommend postponement, you can vote in favor of it, recommend support of it, or you can recommend denial of it. Those are the three recommendations. I don't know if no action, I'm not sure where that gets you technically. I'd recommend, if you're going to lean away, a direction postponing it and having it come back myself. That'd be my recommendation to the Planning Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Sayre. Other questions or comments? Mr. Horsfall?
At this point, I'd like to recommend to the Common Council not approve the general development plan of the trail edge development located at 142 Paoli Street with a period.
We have a motion by Mr. Horsfall. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Manley. Questions or comments on the motion? Just to make sure that we have the motion clear, would you repeat that, Mr. Horsfall?
Recommend that the Common Council not approve the general development plan for the trail edge development located at 142 Paoli Street.
So that's a motion.
Not to
excuse me,
approve?
Go ahead.
Not to approve as opposed to postpone.
Correct. That's a denial motion.
Yeah. So then I'll go to council.
Okay.
If it's a motion to deny, it would go to council.
I'm up to something different if.
That's fine.
A more neutral statement than not approve, or.
Could I just ask a question,
Go ahead, Mr.
Mayor?
Manley.
So if we make a recommendation to not approve the general development plan for this project as it's submitted, that doesn't preclude the applicant or city staff from talking about the project further, correct? I mean, that would be, I would assume, but please tell me if I'm wrong, that would be the Plan Commission's sense of this particular iteration of the project. Is that right, or am I not understanding it correctly.
Mr. Sarah?
We can continue to talk. I guess the meeting is next Monday, so the conversation's probably gonna be pretty short and sweet, because if there are changes, I don't think it's gonna be feasible for the architect to make any changes between now and the council.
Right, but first of all, does the council have to take action next week? Does it have to be on the agenda? Or can the council, I guess, how does that go?
Mr. Sarah?
If you make a motion to recommend denial of the project, it would be put on the agenda unless the applicant requests to have it removed from the agenda. So it would be on there because this is coming out of a committee to the council, unless the applicant would pull it off himself.
Mr. Heinzen?
For further clarification,
That's right.
is there any difference from the developer standpoint in the following two circumstances? We recommend to the council not to approve, or we postpone this. In both cases, I mean, is one more final than the other, or in both of those circumstances, is it just, if the developer wants to continue, the conversation continues? You know, it's gonna be obviously after the council, but is it just like, well, let's make another run at it?
Mr. Sarah?
I would kind of defer to the developer on that, of what their preference are. I mean, the question to the developer of, you know, can changes be made or not? And, you know, that's a question for the developer.
If you would.
Thank you for asking the question, because those are the very same things that are running through my mind. I guess what we're curious to know is, if we are denied tonight and it moves to the Common Council and then it's denied, does that take us back to square one process? Or are we, if we're tabled tonight, or if we're deferred, or however you want to split the hair, can we work with staff, work with neighborhood, work with whoever to continue to develop this project and bring it back again for another positive vote?
Mr. Heinzen?
And that was the question I was getting at, I guess. My own preference among, you know, for other members of the planning commission would be to not to make this definitively not, if it means that they have to go back to square one. I think it's reasonable to, you know, allow them to take a look at it and come back with a general development plan, again, if they so desire.
And that's the point that I was trying to make when I was sort of making my recommendation, that rather than deny, if it would be postponed. The other thing we have to remember is that just because we're recommending denial, if it's on the agenda for the council meeting could still vote to approve it. But we do have a motion and a second that is recommending denial. So is there, Mr. Manley?
Mr. Mayor, isn't it true that the Common Council could vote to approve the project, could vote to deny the project, or could vote to postpone it, defer it, table it, take some other action other than approving it or denying it?
Absolutely, that is correct, and I should have pointed that out. So it's what I was thinking at the time, but you're exactly right, is that the council doesn't have to follow the direction of the Plan Commission. They could still do something other, but you're right, there are other options out there.
Thank you.
Mr. Horsfall?
And that was kind of my point. I was hoping that, you know, as Patrick kind of elaborated, that, you know, we're just kind of advisory, and, you know, the council is the ones that really have responsibility to kind of determine where we want to go with this. And I'd like to, the reason I want to have some motion to have them talk about it is so that they can weigh in one way or the other. If they're willing to move forward with higher density developments, and that's the direction the city wants to take, I mean, that's something that the Planning Commission should understand and maybe move in that direction. But, so that's what I'm looking for, a discussion at least.
Okay. Further, Mr. Heinzen, please.
Which brings me back to the first, I guess, my first question, which is, if we recommend denial and the council denies, legally, where is the developer? Is the developer back at square one, or is the developer back at the same spot the developer is tonight?
Mr. Sarah?
I think the developer would back where he is tonight, unless there's a substantial change to it that would warrant a different type of concept review. So if the developer came back and a lot of the items addressed tonight, I think that would still be in the same step 3. You'd still have to do a public hearing. You have to go through that process as well, but it wouldn't just be back to the concept again. You basically back to where you are right now.
Okay, thank you.
That'd be my opinion, at least.
Any other questions or comments on the motion? The motion that is before us is to recommend denial. Seeing no other questions, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion carries. Just got to get caught up here for a second. We are now on agenda item number 7, which is discussion and possible action regarding certified survey map to create 3 lots at the southwest corner of Liberty Drive and Fortune Drive. If we were to take action, this would be a recommendation to the Common Council. Mr. Sayre, please.
Thank you. The applicant is requesting to create 3 lots at the southwest corner of Liberty Drive and Fortune Drive and Liberty Business Park. The first lot, lot number 1, would contain the existing office commercial building that is currently under construction. Lots 2 and 3 are zoned commercial and are planned for future commercial development. The CSM does provide the necessary cross-access easements and storm sewer easements as well. Staff has no concerns with the CSM, and staff recommends the Plan Commission recommend the Common Council approval of the CSM to create 3 lots at the southwest corner of Liberty Drive and Fortune Drive.
Thank you, Mr. Sayre. Are there questions or comments? Any questions or comments? Not seeing any. I'm sorry, Mr. Lytle, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't want to completely spoil my streak that I had going, but as I recall, we approved the original plat for Liberty Business Park with some knowledge that what was sketched out, and which were some rather large lots, as end users came available, would more likely than not be subdivided into smaller lots through CSMs. And I'm assuming this is just one more case of that, but if Mr. Sayre could clarify if I'm remembering that incorrectly.
Boy,
Mr. Sayre, please.
that was before my time, but I would think that's reasonable. I mean, this lot itself is quite large right now. I think, I think you're going to see this happen throughout Liberty Park just because of the fact of the sheer size of these lots. If you don't have a large user on it, they're going to get split up. But if that wasn't the case, which I think it probably was, it makes a lot of sense to be doing this.
Other questions, comments, potential motions? Mr. Manley?
I'll make a motion to approve the certified survey map as presented.
We have a motion by Mr. Manley. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Horsfall. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, again, the motion is to recommend to the Common Council approval. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion carries. Next, we're on agenda item number 8, which is discussion and actually it's no action here this evening, correct? It's going to the Common Council next week. Plan development concept plan for Candinas property located at 2435 Old County Trunk Highway PB that will contain the existing Candinas building, a restaurant, a coffee shop, retail space, and 20 townhouses. Mr. Sayre, if you would, please.
So this is the concept plan review for the Candinas property located at Old County Highway PB. It is discussion only. This will go to the council as well, just for discussion. So there is no motion tonight, and there'll be no motion at the council per the ordinance. The background on this is the applicant is proposing to a plan unit development to allow for the expansion of the existing Candinas chocolate factory, 20 townhouse units, an 1,800 square foot coffee shop with a drive-through window, 5 1,800 square foot retail buildings and a 120 seat restaurant. The applicant would need to extend sewer and water for this project. The property is currently located in the town, but it is located within the city's urban service area. This project was discussed by the Plan Commission and Council in July. Comments from the Plan Commission included some commissioners supporting the multifamily on this project and other commissioners not supporting the multifamily component. In general, the Plan Commission showed support for the additional commercial development in this area. At the July council meeting, 6 residents from the neighborhood surrounding Candina spoke in opposition to the concept plan. In general, the comments from the council included support for the commercial component of this project, concerns about the inclusion of multifamily in this development. The council also wanted to make the project more walkable from the surrounding neighborhood. Between the July concept meeting and I guess tonight, the applicant has held 2 neighborhood meetings. The most recent neighborhood meeting was on November 19th. I should point out that I did receive a letter, I think it was today, from some of the neighbors in the area. It was signed by, I think, approximately 104 residents and neighbors surrounding the property opposing the project. I believe that was sent out to the Plan Commission, so I will not read that for sake of time. From a bulk standpoint, precise setbacks were not included on the plan itself. It appears the restaurant and coffee building, the restaurant will be located in the northeast corner. The coffee would be located in the southeast corner. Those would be set back approximately 30 feet from the right-of-way line. The townhouse units located in this area, those would be set back approximately 30 feet from the adjacent property. At the previous concept, for the most part, the non-residential items on the plan have not changed. The change to the plan has been the multifamily component. The concept the Plan Commission and Council reviewed in July had a 24 unit apartment building. It was a single building. The applicant has now broken the multifamily into these kind of 3 separate pods or areas. The design of these would be more townhouse style versus just an apartment building itself. Parking on the site, the applicant is proposing 136 parking stalls. This would include 90 surface stalls, 20 garage spaces, and 20 driveway parking spaces. An exemption to this would be required by the ordinance if the project does go forward. Staff continues to recommend the applicant look at the parking on the site and try to figure out how to cluster it better. I think the design as it is laid out now could create some time of day demands, especially when you have a busy restaurant. I think if the parking was clustered a little better, it might benefit the overall operations of all the users and retail uses occurring in this area. Access to the site is still planned from County Highway PB. The existing driveway would be realigned, so it would be lined up with Grandview Road to the east. If the project goes forward, staff recommends the applicant perform a traffic impact analysis at TIA to determine what type of access is required from Old County Highway PB. That may include left-hand turn lanes or right-hand turn lanes dedicated for the project. Conceptual drainage and stormwater pond was shown on the site. It's the large pond in the middle of the property. As the project moves forward, the applicant will need to submit more detailed plans. Architecturally, the commercial part of this is unchanged from the last Plan Commission and Council review. The applicant is proposing EVIS and wood for the commercial buildings. The buildings would be approximately 20 feet tall. The multifamily, this is, like I said previously, it was changed from a single unit apartment building of 24 units, and they've broken out into 3 kind of separate townhouse areas. On the screen here, you have the kind of the front elevation of what it may look like, and the bottom shot here is kind of the screenshot of how it would look with the adjacent residential areas. They are proposing to build the townhouse units into the hill, so they have gotten closer to the single-family homes surrounding the property because they are building the project into the hill in an attempt to reduce the mass and the height of the project itself. The last building that you reviewed was 3 stories, if you recall. So they have gotten closer to the houses, but they have been reduced in height by down to 2 stories. The comprehensive plan, I'm sorry, let me finish this. Once again, we have additional elevations. This is a SketchUp drawing. This is looking towards the southwest. Behind here in the gray, there's an existing berm with some trees, and then behind that you have this is single-family homes. Off the screen here, you also then would have the pond and Candina's chocolate factory. The materials on this project would include stone and wood panels. The applicant did submit an example of just potentially what this could look like. It would have that more of that pitched roof or butterfly roof. I think it's probably an architectural term for that, but the roof would have some slope and changes to it. It wouldn't just be a typical looking apartment building. From a comprehensive plan standpoint, the Southeast Neighborhood Plan does not include or identify the Cantinas property for future land use. The plan does identify Grandview Road as a minor collector and plans for non-residential land uses immediately east of 18151. The property is currently located in the town of Rona. It's used for commercial purposes and is zoned for commercial as well too. Concurrently, if the project moves forward at the GDP stage, the applicant will need to submit an annexation request because it is located within the town. As we've discussed previously, the city does have a residential phasing policy which limits the number of multifamily units we can construct each year to 25 to 50. This project could be exempted by that because it's a mixed-use project once again. Currently, the city has 0 multifamily units allocated to 2016. Some staff comments and things that kind of for the Plan Commission to consider as you discuss this project tonight. Staff is open to development occurring on this parcel. The parcel it's currently a 5-acre piece of land that is zoned commercial in the town and is surrounded by 3 sides by the city by single-family homes. There are significant challenges to this site. The first challenge that staff sees is the cost associated with extension of services, including water and sewer, and the necessary road improvements to the County Highway PB. There are significant costs to make those improvements and run water and run sewer. That is a challenge for this property. I think the second challenge is the existing Candinas chocolate factory that's was initially located in the middle of the property. I think now for better or for worse, I think it gets a little bit in the way of trying to work around that, and the challenge of trying to plan around that and put buildings around it does make it challenging. It's not just a blank 5-acre piece of property. I think the third challenge is for both the developer and the adjacent neighbors of balancing both the desires of both parties. I think the developer, the challenge is the balancing the concerns of the neighbors, and I think also with the neighbors is balancing the owner's desire to develop this property in some fashion. Development is going to happen on this property. It may not be next year, it may not be 2 years from now, maybe 5, 10, 15. Development's going to happen. It's a 5-acre piece surrounded by the city of Verona. Some type of development is going to happen on here. But I think both whoever the developer is and the neighbors need to be realistic in what their expectations are of what can and cannot occur there right now. Right now, the property is located in the town of Verona. If the city were to deny a project on this property, the property owner could actually develop some of these items in the town. It would be on well, it would be on septic, it would not be to the scale of development, but there is a chance that it wouldn't be in the city. So I just want to lay that out there as well too, that someone could come in and have development on this property that we will have no say in, even though it's bordered on 3 sides by the city. So I think there is a balance here also of ensuring a high quality development of whatever happens, but balancing the need that trying to keep that in the city versus having that in the town. There are a variety of uses allowed right now. The property is zoned C1s. It's a very generous district by town and county standards. So some of the items allowed in there are your general commercial uses, but one of the items that is a conditional use is an apartment. So apartments are allowed in the town with a conditional use permit. Now they have to go through the findings of facts, they have to have a septic system, they have to meet the code requirements, but that is a use that is allowed currently in the town. I think the big issue here that the Plan Commission and Council need to give direction to staff on and also give direction to the developer on is the multifamily component of this project. That seems to be the one issue that is coming up continually about this of will the council, will the Plan Commission support multifamily on this property or not? If the answer is no, I think the site plan is going to change significantly. I will say that staff has been somewhat reluctant to give clear direction and precise comments to the applicant because, to be quite honest, I'm not sure if this is going to be approved or not. So besides sinking a lot of staff time and dollars and also the developers' dollars and time into this, if it's a non-starter just from the get-go, we need that direction. Staff needs that direction, and the developer needs that direction. I think staff is open to kind of looking at this from a redevelopment standpoint. If multifamily if there's a feeling for that multifamily is appropriate on the property, I do think there should be some changes in the design of this, how it's laying out. I will say that as it's laid out now, I do struggle with how this flows and how this functions. I don't think the transition from the non-residential to the residential is smooth. I don't, it's hard to visualize that. I think the parking on this is still challenging. I think parking is a concern out there, how the parking is laid out and planned. But the long-term viability of the parking is what I'm specifically concerned about, is if it's not located close enough to these retail uses or the commercial uses, it's going to make it challenging long-term. So if we go forward with a plan of multifamily and commercial, one idea for the applicant to consider is trying to cluster more of the uses in the middle of the property. If the goal is here to create more of a European-type village with walkability and clustering uses around, your typical European villages have basically all those uses kind of clustered together. You have the actual apartments above the commercial, and you usually have like a little plaza in the middle as a gathering space. I think this is spreading itself a little too much, and I think if that's the intent, we should probably take a closer look at that village. But the point, I guess, tonight is from a staff level perspective, we do need feedback on the multifamily. If it's just a no way, no how, not in any form, that's fine. We just need to hear that. We need to hear that so we can move forward, the applicant can move forward, I think the neighbors can move forward as well, one way or the other, with some more certainty of what is going to happen tonight. So this is an item that staff recommends the Plan Commission provide feedback to the applicant on. There is no action tonight. It will go to council next Monday, where there'll be no action at council as well too. It's, once again, it'll be the opportunity to provide feedback and comments on the design. But I'd be happy to answer any questions. I know the applicant is here tonight as well, along with the architects and planners, and they'd be happy to answer any questions you have too.
Thank you, Mr. Sayre. Questions or comments from Plan Commission members? Mr. Manley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had expressed concern when we first saw this project about the multifamily aspect of this, and really being surrounded essentially on all sides by single-family housing, and without a whole lot of forewarning to the people who built those houses that we could be seeing a significant multifamily development located here. And I continue to have those same concerns, although I'll say that this concept with having townhouses with individual units and so forth is, I think, a step in the right direction. There are elements of the commercial part of this development that I think are, would be beneficial to the city and could be done in a way that was not obtrusive to the neighborhood, so that we had, sort of a balance between the applicant, the property owner, and his desire to, make this property into something more than it is economically, with the property rights of the dozen or so homeowners who abut this property. I do think that if you were going to do any level of multifamily, having it situated where it is in this concept, which is in extremely close proximity to the single-family homes, I think doesn't make sense. I think you could do this in a way where you moved the multifamily, the townhouse element of this, either further inside, to the center of the property, or closer to County Highway PB, where you'd have less, proximity to existing homes. Because I guess although it's a very different project and very different level of density and so forth, this is at least similar to the Paoli Street project, in that we're talking about putting multifamily, denser multifamily development adjacent to existing single family, without having ever planned to do so. and without existing property owners ever having been given any kind of a forewarning that might happen. So I guess if the point tonight is to give some additional feedback to the applicant, those would be some of my thoughts. The other thing that I guess will be a question for Adam, as we look at this site plan, there is what looks like it could be some type of a trail. It's a very kind of squiggly line going around the perimeter. Is that indeed like a walking trail or a sidewalk, or what is that?
Mr. Sarah?
My understanding is it's a trail. It'd be a private trail for the residents living in the development.
Okay. I guess that's what I thought it was. And I guess my reaction to that would be, if you're trying to design something that will provide a buffer between your development and people's property, putting a walking trail in between these housing units and their backyard property line probably is incompatible with that. I don't think putting a trail where people can walk adjacent to people's backyards is probably what we would, at least from my standpoint, what we would want to do to provide existing property owners with a measure of privacy from this development.
Thank you, Mr. Manley. Other comments? Mr. Lytle, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I, again, wasn't here the first time we saw this come before the Plan Commission, but reading through Adam's report, I thought he made some really good points, and I sort of had an aha moment as he suggested looking at a design that was multi-use buildings where the commercial component is on the ground floor and you could put some townhomes or apartments above. I think that is a way that you could achieve a lot of the goals you're trying to here with a lot less impact on the neighbors. I realize that's easy for me to say and potentially a lot harder for you all to implement, but I think that's a layout that is worth considering and bringing back before us, and I would be much more likely to support. This is a rare opportunity in this part of town, and I want to see you successful, and I want to see you be able to utilize this property and maximize utilization while not causing undue burden on the neighbors. The neighbors have clearly got some significant concerns. So I want the city to be the one to work with you in this, and I think we can find some middle ground here. I feel pretty confident about that. So Adam's got a pretty good sense for this, and I think some of his suggestions, if taken to heart, might yield a more preferable approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lytle. Other questions, comments? Just my comments again, and this is on the multifamily concerns. And my comments that I made before about multifamily. When we talk about multifamily in the downtown, and I've said this before, that I can support this in the downtown area if we were to redevelop and have retail on the lower level with some residential on top. I think that makes sense. That brings that foot traffic that's necessary in the downtown. And I agree also with if the multifamily were to remain, I would like to see it more towards the center. Other comments? Mr. Horsfall, please.
I agree with that too. When Adam was talking about kind of the European model of having it clustered in the middle and having things on the outside that create the barrier, again, I'm kind of like Patrick, had a little aha moment. That seems like it'd be a nice addition to this property and maybe keep the activities away from the backyards of the single residential. So I'm not opposed to having residential there, but keeping it away from the current or multi-use or multi-family, but keeping it away from the current single family would be my desire. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? or questions for the applicant? I know the applicant is here. Okay, I don't see any other questions or comments, and there's no action to be taken on this item. We are now on agenda item number 9, which would be just action by the Plan Commission, and that would be initial review of a proposed 7,850 square foot commercial building to be located at 631 Hometown Circle. If you would, Mr. Sayre.
Thank you. This is an initial review for a proposed 7,100 square foot multi-tenant commercial building to be located at 631 Hometown Circle. This project will be located west of the existing Dairy Queen and then also east of the Little Caesars building. This is the last, I guess, vacant, empty outlot that's along Hometown Circle and Verona Avenue. The initial review, there is no action tonight, so this is just the opportunity to provide feedback to the applicant as they work on their site plan, prepare their drawings. The property is zoned suburban commercial. It is also part of a planned unit development overlay district and part of the downtown overlay district as well too. The applicant has not identified specific users at this time, but there is a drive-through on the east side of the building. Most likely that would be some type of food establishment. Approval for this project would include a site plan approval from the Plan Commission and then a conditional use permit for the conditional use for the drive-through and also for any indoor commercial entertainment land uses. Tentatively, the applicant is planning starting the building in 2016. The site plan on the screen is slightly different than the one that's actually in your packet. The building has gotten a little bit smaller. The applicant is still working on kind of refining some of the details on the site. That includes the stormwater pond of how big that's going to be. So it has gone down a little bit because of that, but relatively for discussion purposes, this is fairly consistent with what was in your packet. From a bulk standpoint, the building would be set back approximately 15 feet from Verona Avenue. That does meet the minimum maximum setbacks of the overlay district. The proposed building would also meet the side yard setback requirements as well too. Staff has no concerns with that at this time. The building also would conform to the minimum 20-foot height requirement of the overlay district. The applicant is proposing 54 parking spaces as part of this project. That comes out to about 7 spaces per 1,000. In general, that is a ratio that's desired from commercial users. The applicant has not identified any users at this time, so it's impossible for us to project out what parking would be. For the most part, the site is maximized with parking, so you have the drive-through on the east, you have the stormwater pond in the middle, the building and the rest of the site would be parking, so they are taking full advantage of the amount of parking they can have there. Access to the site, access on the west would be a joint shared access with the multi-tenant building to the west. The access on the east would be exclusive for this property. It would be a full access point. Staff and the applicant we did discuss connecting these two driveways here. I think at the recommendation of staff, we advised against that, and the reason we advised against that is that the Dairy Queen drive-through there is challenging. If you've ever driven through that, it's not your typical drive-through. It causes you to kind of shoot out to the north here, then come back down. It's not ideal to be getting in and out of there, especially when this exit for Dairy Queen is an exit only. So for safety reasons, and after we looked at it, we just felt it was safer and more. It'd be smarter not to connect those. We just had a lot of concerns with that. So that's why it's not connected. And staff will, I guess, recommend that it doesn't connect just because that drive-through configuration is not. It's not going to be conducive to allowing traffic get in and out of there. Stormwater plans have not been submitted with this project. Similar to the Dairy Queen project in Taco Bell, there is a stormwater pond planned kind of wrapping around the drive-through. Staff will review those plans as they come in. Architecturally, the applicant is proposing a building that would be similar to the one to the west. Currently, the applicant is proposing split-face masonry, ephes, and lap siding. Staff has recommended the applicant incorporate brick or stone material into the design of the building and reduce the amount of ephes. Further, staff does also recommends additional windows be placed in the building. I think one item that, beyond the architecture, that staff would look for feedback tonight is this dumpster enclosure. We've been working with the applicant on where the best places to put that on the property. And to be honest with you, there really aren't that many good ones. If you have any feedback on that, it would be appreciated. I just know my initial comment to the applicant was trying to relocate it. The place they located it would not work for setbacks. But if the Planning Commission has any ideas, I'd be open to hearing it. But I know the architect and I don't have any good ideas at this point. So with that, I know the applicant and the architect are here tonight. They'd be more than happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Sayre. Any comments, thoughts? Mr. Horsfall, please.
Have we ever had shared dumpsters? Which means not the Dairy Queen, but the property to the west.
Mr. Sayre.
Could they expand that and?
Yeah, it crossed my mind. I didn't suggest it to the applicant because just looking at the size of that one, I'm not sure how it would work. You've got basically 14,000 square feet dumping into that. I think that might create some logistic issues of cost of trash removal, and I would suspect the garbage provider is probably already complaining about how this is configured as is because they like to come in straight and then back straight out and go. This is a typical, you have to wheel it out and get out of the truck and move it, but it's a good idea, but I would defer, I guess, to the architect if he has any thoughts on that.
I have another comment as long as you're coming up. Is there going to be pedestrian access from the road down below?
Yes, yeah, they'll, eventually as we develop the plans and hopefully develop, as tenants come on, we would have, similar to the other building, we would have sidewalks coming up to the building so that even though, if it's a restaurant user, a lot of those users, even on the corner building, we're gonna have to black out the windows because it's usually back of house, places. That's the difficulty of a four-sided building. So, we've reviewed staff comments, and I think we're agreeable to most of those. One of the concerns are you're putting glass, but you're just blacking them out again, just because of the function of the space. To answer or at least comment on the shared trash, they will be separate landowners. Now, could an agreement maybe be made? Possibly. I know there are existing concerns with how that trash enclosure functions currently, as was the drive-through, which I think we've corrected over time, at least to the best of our ability. So I think it's an option to discuss, but I'm, because of the different property owners at this point in time, it may be difficult to kind of come to an agreement.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. Other comments? Any other feedback? Mr. Lytle, please.
I had to really zoom in, but I see a call out for a monument sign, and I think signage on the building in this part of town with the Farm and Fleet giant monuments at either end are sufficient. So I'm not going to want to see a monument sign personally.
Thank you. Mr. Manley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to make a comment about the architecture, and I think looking at the elevations that were presented, to the extent that we could incorporate more brick and stone, I think that would be desirable. I think otherwise, it's a nice looking building, and there's, some, different textures there. There's some architectural interests, awnings, and so I think it generally looks nice. I think in terms of the trash enclosure and where you cite that, gosh, I don't know. I don't think looks like there's a great solution, unless you don't need all of the area that is in the middle of the drive-through. If there was some way that you could, on the outer perimeter of the, of that area, if you could put it there, in the end where the cars enter. But if you need that entire area for stormwater management, then that's probably not doable.
Mr. Sarah, please.
First, regarding the dumpster, that was one idea that I had, and I think due to space, that's probably not going to be able to work. Most likely that pond is going to be steep, similar to Dairy Queen, so I don't, it's a good idea, but I don't think it's going to work just because of space in there. Regarding the monument sign, the whole reason this is a PUD was for the monument signs out there. So what we've done in the past is Dairy Queen was the first one approved. That was the first project approved, these 4 outlots. The Plan Commission granted a monument sign for that one. I've always told people on the corners, on the end corners, so Taco Bell and the multi-tenant building to the west, that there would be no monument signs granted there. I think from a staff perspective, regarding the sign for this lot, we gave one to Dairy Queen, similar situation. I don't know if we opened that door or not, but I guess I raised that issue to the Plan Commission of, from an equity standpoint, it was provided to the one to the east of it, and it's a middle lot, so I've made sure we've kept them off the corners because there are the 2 signs there right now. I'll just raise that point of that.
Thank you, Mr. Sayre. Mr. Heinzen, please.
Yes, thank you. And just to comment on that, Mr. Sayre, this is going to be a multi-use building, though, correct? Yeah. So there's one distinction between the Dairy Queen and whatever monument sign would be used where you have 4 tenants. So I agree with Mr. Lytle.
Thank you. Other questions or comments?
Just
go ahead.
Because I have such a poor memory with a lot of things, I have a particularly strong memory of this because as we approved the signage that Farm and Fleet wanted, that was a condition that we wanted them to communicate as they sold their outlots to their tenants. And we decided to be nice guys because Dairy Queen had some national standard that they needed to advertise their specials on blizzards. It was not an exception that I voted for, and I will continue to vote against them. But I know you've got to play the balance.
Thank you. Other questions? Any other feedback? Not at this point, and there's no action taken this evening. So we will move then to item number 10, which is a public hearing on a subdivision regulations text amendment to create section 14-1-10A, parent 48A, defining a private street and amending section 14-1-70, parent M, related to the regulation of private streets. Do I have a motion to open the public hearing? We have a motion by Mr. Horsfall. Is there a second? Second. Seconded by Mr. Manley. All those in favor of opening the public hearing signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. And that motion carries. Mr. Sayre, please.
Thank you. The request tonight is from the city to amend our subdivision regulations relating to private streets. A public hearing is required before the Plan Commission and the Common Council. So there will be a public hearing tonight, and there will also be one next Monday as well, too.
Thank you, Mr. Sayre. Questions? Or actually, we're in the public hearing stage. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak on this agenda item? Is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak? Anyone desiring to speak on this agenda item? Seeing none, I would accept the motion to close the public hearing. We have a motion by Mr. Horsfall. Is there a second? Second. Seconded by Mr. Lytle. All those in favor of closing the public hearing signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. That motion carries. We are now on agenda item 10A. If we were to take action, it would be a recommendation to the Common Council. Mr. Sayre, if you would, please.
So for the past few months, the Public Safety and Welfare Committee has been discussing private streets and their impact on public safety. Concerns from that committee included maintenance of private streets, snow removal, street repairs, public safety enforcement, and public safety access. Staff and legal counsel drafted the ordinance that was in your packet, which defines a private street. The ordinance also states that private streets will only be approved in extraordinary circumstances, and if they are approved, they'll be designated as a fire lane. The fire lane option gives the city more enforcement of removal of vehicles or things that might be parked in those as well too. This ordinance applies only to subdivision regulations, so if and when we're looking at any projects that have a private street and they're creating an outlot from that, this is when that would apply. It wouldn't apply to, say, the Candinas project we looked at tonight. If they keep that all under one owner and doesn't go through a land division process, it wouldn't apply towards that. That would still be reviewed on a case-by-case basis by the Plan Commission, by the council, through the normal process. So this is only for the subdivision and land division when that occurs. The Public Safety Committee discussed this ordinance on November 9th, and they forwarded this ordinance to the Plan Commission for review and recommendation. Staff has reviewed the ordinance. Our current ordinance does not have a definition relating to private streets, so the ordinance will help with that. Further, the ordinance provides further clarity on the feelings and directions from the City Council and staff, or excuse me, the Plan Commission of private streets and I guess the opinion that they're frowned upon. They are not encouraged in land divisions, so it does provide greater clarity for future development. So that staff recommends the Plan Commission recommend to the Common Council approval and adoption of the subdivision regulation ordinance amendment relating to private streets. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Sayre. And I would just add to your comments when you said city staff, I just wanted to make the point that Chief Coughlin was at the Public Safety Committee and is in agreement with this as well. Mr. Heinzen, please.
I have no concerns with this. I think it's probably a good idea, but do you have examples of private streets right now in Verona?
Mr. Sayre, please.
Well, the question is, how do you define a private street? But the examples we have are North Edge Trail. There's portions of that from Cross Country to Prairie Way, I think it is. Prairie by Goddard School, where that building is being constructed. There's a segment running east-west there as well, which is a private street. The streets in the west end, before the CSMs are approved, those were private streets. In Eastview Heights, off of Goldenrod, there's a couple private streets or driveways that kind of come off of there. I mean, if you really want to argue what a private street is and isn't, you might have some at Epic. Look at Hubble Road wrapping around the campus there. That could be argued as a private street as well. So those are, I guess, a few examples.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? Mr. Horsfall, please.
With, bringing Epic up as an example, and also the other, PUDs, a lot of times back in the early 2000s, they were saying we want to put these private roads in there because it kind of gets them, they can fit more density in. And that's kind of, from what I remember, is kind of, that's why they wanted to go to, the right-of-ways, instead of 36, it's like 32 or something like that. So they could just, put more housing and stuff like that. So they always promise that, we'll take care of them and as a private street. So what exactly is the safety concern? Are they not maintaining them? Is that the issue? Or fire trucks? They always was worried about that.
Mr. Sayre, please.
Well, maintenance is an issue on some. I mean, I can't say all, but some of them, it's a maintenance issue of plowing, maintenance of potholes. Part of it is they weren't constructed to city standards. There is the concern that in some of these that you can park a vehicle there and the city lacks enforcement, potentially tow that because it's not a city street, it's an outlot, so it's not an actual roadway itself. So if someone, say, parked a boat in front of someone's driveway on a private street, you're not parking the boat in front of someone's actual road in a public right-of-way, you're parking it on someone's private property and blocking it. It convolutes the discussion. I will say this is not retroactive. This does not apply to anything that we have right now. This is only going forward. But
yeah, and so again, one of the reasons that the advantage of having a private street was that the city got out of the maintenance business in that, PUD area. So there was that was another argument for, hey, let's do some private streets. We don't have to worry about plowing them and maintaining them, even if they're substandard. If they complain, then you knew it when you bought the condo or whatever, that this was a private street. So I understand moving forward, but I think there might be sometimes benefits to having private streets or not. I feel like they're kind of getting outlawed a little bit here.
Good. Mr. Sayre?
And it does not prohibit it. That was one of the conversations we had as staff of making sure that we had the flexibility if there was a project that came forward that it was appropriate. I mean, that's why the language doesn't ban them outright. I mean, yeah, it does kind of put the screws to them and makes it more difficult to do it, which I think is the intent of the Public Safety Committee. But I think especially from a planning and development standpoint, you want to at least keep the door cracked, because you could have a project that we can't think of right now that we might go, yeah, we need this as a private street for whatever reason. And I can't think of what the example is off the top of my head, but Epic is probably a good example of all the roads they have going all over the place out there. But it does not ban them, so we can still approve them. It's just, if we do approve them, we have to put language in declaring them fire lanes, which addresses some of that public safety and concern there.
Thanks.
Thank you. Other questions, comments, potential motions? Mr. Manley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, so just so that I'm clear, there are no existing, I'll just use the term roads, that would become classified as a private street under this proposal and change either the ownership or the maintenance obligations that as they currently exist today. Is that correct?
It will,
Yes, sir.
it will define what a private street is and isn't, but it will not change the ownership, it will not change the maintenance, it will not change whatever is going on today. It's not gonna go back and have some retroactive enforcement on it. We can't do that. We can't adopt an ordinance that says all private streets have to, I don't know, you can't just drop a fire lane language on that, for example. But this is only going forward in future land divisions only, so it would not impact those today.
So to the extent that Epic or any other property owner has a roadway that would qualify as a private street under this definition, it doesn't become defined as such unless there's a land division that happens.
Correct.
In
Yeah,
the future.
It may be defined, but there's no regulatory change unless there's actually a land division occurring and they're creating that as an outlot or a lot of some type.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Further questions, potential motions? Mr. Horsfeld, please.
At this time, I'd like to recommend that the Common Council approve and adopt the subdivision regulation ordinance amendment relating to private streets.
We have a motion by Mr. Horsfeld. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Heinzen. Further questions or comments on the motion? Not seeing any. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. That motion carries. Agenda item number 11 is a very lengthy agenda item. We have discussion and possible action regarding a petition by the City of Verona to annex approximately 83.79 acres of land into the City of Verona. I will leave it at that for now. Mr. Sayre, please.
Thank you. The city is requesting to annex lands that the city owns into the city. They're currently in the town of Verona. The land highlighted in yellow here is the non-metallic mining pit that's located on the east side of 9 Mountain Road. The city purchased that a few months ago for right-of-way purchases and also for a future fill site for the city. We also currently own the house that is immediately south of there as well. That's the former Roth property as well. And that was purchased once again for the reconstruction of 9 Mountain Road. The annexation of this, the request is to annex the areas in yellow, and we'd also annex at the same time the entire length of 9 Mountain Road. So 9 Mountain Road currently is split approximately here at just north of Apollo Drive, which isn't in, but we'd annex the entire length of the road right away up to County Highway PD. We currently have an agreement with the town regarding 9 Mountain Road that we maintain, enforce, and follow all the road maintenance and traffic issues. We take care of that. That's an agreement that we have. Pretty much if we annex the right of way, then we'd be within our jurisdiction completely without that agreement. There are 2 electors that currently live at the Roth property. When we purchased that house, we allowed the Roths to live there for up to a year. They have signed the annexation petition. The petition has been submitted to the state. The town has also completed the questionnaire for this as well. The town is supportive of this. The city's comprehensive plan identifies the pit as future open space, so our use of fill is consistent with what the plan states. The pit, the quarry itself, would not be within the urban service area right now. We did include the Roth property in our urban service area amendment. Most likely that house will be removed from that property in the near future, so you probably won't have any city services there, but it was included in our recent urban service area amendment. Taxes, once again, the city will pay the 5 years' worth of taxes on this. That's consistent with our policy. State statute requires the municipality to pay 5 years of taxes to the town. We'll do that. The property would be zoned rural agricultural, RA. That's a pretty typical district that when we annex properties, we bring them in, zone them as ag. Since both of these properties will be vacant in the future, that's an appropriate use of it, and appropriate zoning of it. So that staff recommends the Plan Commission recommend to the Common Council approval of the request to annex 83.79 acres of land to the city of Verona.
Thank you, Mr. Sayre. Questions or comments from Planning Commission members? Mr. Horsfall?
Just a couple ones. Is it eventually going to be, so it's going to be RA, is it going to be public institutional?
Mr. Sayre,
To
please.
kind of guarantee that open space?
Well, yeah, so I mean, RA, it's more of the holding zone. I think the reality from the city is we need to probably do a plan, more of a specific plan of how we're going to use this property exactly.
Okay.
There is a road that's going to come through about the middle part of it, coming from the north neighborhood to provide that east-west connection, take some stress off of PD. I think long-term, yeah, I think it's probably going to get rezoned. I think the envision with that north neighborhood plan was fill and practice fields, 80 acres of practice fields. And I think that's still kind of the long-term, for the most part, the long-term vision there. The city does have an approximate 20-acre site that we're going to keep and retain for our fill and dump needs, but the rest of it, I think, is, yeah, it's going to be probably practice fields. That's the goal.
One more.
Go ahead.
So going to the west, there's a line, that's the city of Verona from Nine Mound? So that pond is within the city?
So
that pond is split?
Yeah, the split. So the red line is the city of Verona boundaries today. So that pond is partially split by ownership, I believe, too. I think Epic owns south of the line, and I want to say, was it Wingra? Wingra owns north of there.
Yeah, I'd like to do the survey on that one.
Mr. Manley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple of questions. The first is, do we know what our financial obligation is relative to the 5 years of tax payments to the town for this property?
Mr. Burns, do you know offhand?
We do know that number and had calculated that and built that into the budget when we were looking at the purchase of this property. I don't recall the exact figure off the top of my head right now. You may be able to find it.
I want to say total $17,000-$18,000. Okay.
That sounds like
that's the total for 5 years. So divide that by 5 for each year.
I know, Scott, you've got more, but maybe Steve has a follow-up to this. Mr.
I was
Heinz?
just going to say, as the ong of the property, I was thinking that the city was already paying the town, but it wouldn't be paying property taxes as a government entity. So I'm going to retract that question after I just laid it out there for everybody.
All right, Mr. Manley?
And then the second question I had is so this is a former non-metallic mine that I'm guessing it has not been fully reclaimed yet, since we're dumping material in it right now. Does the city's annexation of this property transfer the responsibility to oversee the reclamation from either the town or county who's doing it right now? Do we take on that regulatory obligation?
Mr. Gunlock, please.
It's my understanding from the city attorney that there is no requirement to reclaim it once it's in the city, as far as the county is concerned. We do not have to provide a reclamation plan to the county for this. But we are gonna, eventually, this is gonna be completely filled in. It's gonna be back to grade where it was in the early 1960s when there was not a pit there. By the time Epic is done filling and the city is done using the north end for a disposal area for material that comes out of streets that needs to be disposed of, this land will be back flat like it was 1960. and then it will be made into, it'll be topsoiled, it'll be seeded, and it'll be made into open space for probably soccer fields, ball fields, whatever.
But we don't have a NR 135 obligation
No.
with this property if we bring it into the city.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, comments? Potential motions? Mr. Manley?
I'll make a motion to recommend approval of the annexation.
We have a motion by Mr. Manley. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Lytle. Questions or comments on the motion? Not seeing any. All those in favor of approval of the petition signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. And that motion carries. We are on agenda item number 12, which is just discussion this evening and no action. Mr. Sayre, if you would, please.
Thank you. Alderperson Diaz has requested that staff look at the public notification process that we use for public hearings. Presently, the city's ordinance requires the city to notify all property owners within 200 feet of any property requesting to be rezoned, obtain a conditional use permit, or requesting a planned unit development. So Alderperson Diaz is requesting we take a look at that and consider increasing the distance that we currently use. Staff, myself, conducted a brief survey of surrounding municipalities. Madison, Middleton, and Sun Prairie notify all property owners within 200 feet. Fitchburg and Stoughton provide a 300-foot notification. State statute does not provide a regulated distance. Actually, it doesn't regulate anything, doesn't even have a number in there. But in general, most municipalities notify all owners within 200 feet of any property. So staff, myself, took a look at the two projects on the agenda tonight. We had the Trail Edge Development and we had Candinas. Candinas didn't have a public hearing, but I just used it because it'd be fresh in your minds. And in your packet, we had the impact, of the potential impact of what that would look like. And I didn't include a slide on that, but currently for the Trail Edge Development, we notified 20 parcels. If we increased our notification distance to 300 feet, we'd have 30 parcels. And at 500 feet, we'd have 48 parcels. Candinas, 200 feet, you pick up 38 parcels. 300 feet, 43. 500 feet, 67. So there's really no correlation. There's no rhyme or reason. You're not going to increase it by percentage. It's going to be based upon a project-by-project basis. Obviously, the more denser type developments, you're going to get more people. Things in Liberty Park, you're not going to get too much. So staff is requesting feedback and direction from the Plan Commission. I think no matter what distance is selected, whether it's 2, 3, 5, it's a number, it's an arbitrary number that someone's going to have issues with. Someone's going to say, "Oh, I wish I would have been notified of that project." You know, we're not going to get away from that. I think the bigger question here is, you know, what is the intent behind the notification? Are we looking to inform? Are we looking to just let people know, hey, this is what's going on in your neighborhood? Or are we looking to actively engage people of, hey, this is what's going on, what do you think of it? Do you want to know what people say or not? And that's a broader conversation, I think, maybe beyond just a 200 or 500 feet. But you know, we have many tools at our disposal. We have a website that has a lot of fun technology features on it that, you know, some we haven't used, some we do use. You know, do we look at utilizing that better as well? But I think engaging the public, I think you know, there are things we can do better, but I think we should be clear on what the intent of that is going to be. If we're going to notify people within 500 feet, do we want them to come here and give us their feedback? And, you know, is that the right forum, or is there a different forum of how we should be doing this or not? It's the broader question of, should it be happening when there's a project before you, or when should that actually be happening? Should it be happening when the newspaper comes out and my phone starts ringing? I mean, that's the broader question here of notification. I will say with the change in the feet, I don't really have an opinion on that. I mean, I think 200 feet, 500 feet, 300 feet, I don't really have a, you know, either one of them is fine with me. I think it's just the bigger question of, you know, as staff, as a city, what should we be doing, and maybe beyond just notifying people, how proactive should we be on these? And I'd be curious to hear more feedback on that. I will say in the 2016 budget, I did budget additional money for public notification because I know Alderperson Diaz had talked to me. So I threw, I think, an extra $1,000 in there. Not sure what we're going to do with this, but just as a safeguard. So it's not a dollar issue by any means. I just want to point that out. But I think it's a larger, broader question that I'd be curious of any reactions to this. And I'm also looking for direction and feedback from you guys too.
Any thoughts from the Plan Commission members? Mr. Horsfall?
My vote's 200.
Other thoughts? We're not voting tonight, but we're looking for feedback.
Let me
so
rephrase that.
Mr. Heinzen?
Sure. I think it should be at least a football field. You know. For the notification, I see it as, I mean, it will depend on the project, but for the most part, I think, you know, we want people who could be touched by the project to know that it's happening. I don't think that we have an obligation to, particularly for most projects, is to have the public weigh in whether they like something or don't like something. It's just making sure that everybody is aware, and frankly, you know, they may not pick up the newspaper. They may not know about what's happening. I mean, right now, you know, you can have information in all kinds of different places, but unless we get it to them, it's going to be lost because you know, folks aren't going to the Verona website to see what's going on in their neighborhood, stuff like that. So I would, I guess I was surprised that it was only 200 feet, but I don't have a real strong sense as to what it should be.
Other comments? Mr. Lytle?
This is an idea I brought up previously. I think there are ways to get visibility within the community beyond mailing out hard copy notifications. I don't know if 300 feet would accomplish that. I don't think so necessarily. I'm sure there's a better local example. I've brought up driving around Fort Collins, and when there's need for one of these rezoning conditional use permit PUDs, they'll actually put a sign in front of the property and they have the applicant agree to that. And you know, that could be as simple as giving your number out to even more people, Adam, or do we want to throw a QR code on there and send them directly to the application if that's available through the city website. That may make your life easier or harder depending on which way you go. But I think, I'm trying to remember, does Fitchburg do anything like that?
Madison does.
Okay. I don't think we have so many of those that suddenly you're placing 20 signs a month, but I know you got lots of other things to spend your time on. I think I would be more interested in something like that for people that drive by, and so I get fewer people coming to me saying, if I hadn't read about it in the press, I would have never even known there was something going on there. And you know, the question is, should they know about it? And my default answer is, why not? So.
Thank you. Mr. Sarah?
Yeah, that's a good point. I know my previous employer, Oconomowoc, when we redid our zoning ordinance, that was one of the things we did. We put signs in there of, hey, when there is a public hearing, you have to post a sign at your property. So I will reach out to them because they've only been using that for about 3 years. And I'd just be curious of just how that's worked for them, because it's a newer example, and you know, they don't have too many public hearings, but I know they have a bunch of them. I know it was an issue of pounding them in the ground and what it says and how big, but I'll reach out to them on that. I know for the Scenic Ridge project, the apartment project, when that came back for a 1-year extension, they put signs up out there. I believe those signs have been installed. They were supposed to be installed. I'm not sure if the mayor has seen that at all, but okay. But those signs should be out there as well too, so that might be another example. They're larger ones, they're 32 square feet, but they have a picture of the project, they have the developer contact, and they have my number, and they have the city website. We do currently post I do my best to get most of the projects on the website, at least the ones that I know people are going to be interested in. So Candinas, Trail Edge Development, the wine bar wasn't on the website, the fitness in the 608 was not on the website, but a lot of those are out there too. But I will look in to see what Oconomowoc has done, because it is new for them, and they're about our size too.
Mr. Manley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think, you know, this is a struggle, and I think it always will be, is how do you get the right information in front of the right people when a project comes along. And I think that the approach that we have right now, which is let's make a special effort to notify the people who live within close proximity, who at least in theory might be impacted or feel like they're impacted or want to weigh in. I think that works pretty well. And I would be open to increasing it from 200 to 300 or 400 or whatever the right number is. If the feeling is that at 200 feet we're not reaching out and touching enough people who might be impacted, then I'd say let's increase it. If we feel like we're hitting everybody at that number, then I'd say let's keep it where it's at. I don't think there's anything magical about the number. I think it's just a matter of let's make sure that we're not leaving people who would be most impacted, out in the cold and left to wonder what just happened and why didn't I know about it. I think that also, another way we might be able to address this is if we don't have this functionality on our website right now, maybe we should consider if people could just sign up for development notifications in the city, so that if there is a proposed conditional use permit, for example, or if there's a proposed annexation, or sort of some of the larger types of a general development plan or a precise implementation plan for a PUD, that they can just get an email sent to them that they've signed up, they've self-selected to get that information. And maybe they don't care about it, maybe they do, but it's just something we might think about doing. And then finally, as it relates to signage, I think that's an idea that could hold some promise. I don't know how Madison does it now, but I remember if you think back to when the northern end of Highway M was, before they put the roundabout in and so forth, and there was like a yellow sign about this big tacked to a tree that eventually got cut down when they did all of the clearing out for the stormwater. I mean, you would have to like pull your car over and get out and have really good vision to even be able to read any of that. So if we're going to go the route of let's have a sign, let's do it better than that and make it larger and more useful to people who would be driving by.
Thank you. Mr. Sayre?
I will stay with the notification idea. That's something I can do, so I will do that now, between now and the next meeting. I know I can create something, so that's a feature we do have, so that I will take care of that, and I'll send it out to everybody and let me know how it works, I guess.
Sounds good.
We can opt out of that?
Actually, you have to sign into it, so we can't just add you to it. I think it's considered spam, so I think technically you have to click and sign into it and select what you want to get.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Sayre. So more to come on that. We are moving to announcements then, Mr. Sayre?
The only thing I have is I'd like to move the July Plan Commission meeting date to the first Wednesday of the month. It would benefit me, and I think my wife is watching tonight, but for a vacation that we're taking, so I can move it to right now. July 4th falls on Monday, so we had shifted it to Tuesday, July 5th, and yes, and if I could push it to the Wednesday, I'd appreciate it. If it doesn't work for enough people, we can do it Tuesday as well. I guess take a look and let me know. If it doesn't work, let me know. But
sounds good.
Only other thing, I just want to thank everyone for a busy 2015. I know you guys put in a lot of time and effort, and we have some late meetings, but I just appreciate what you do, and thank you for everything you do. And I mean, you probably don't get thanked enough, at least, but we appreciate it. And I'm guessing 2016 will be just as busy, so hopefully you have a nice holiday and a good Christmas and come back well rested.
Thank you for those comments, Mr. Sayre, and certainly we appreciate everything that the staff does for us as well. There's a lot of things going on, and in my opinion, you do a very good job, and Bill and Bob as well, so thank you very much. With that, we have no other, Mr. Gunlock.
I'll just say that this evening, Jeff Montpass is sitting in the audience. We just hired him. He's a wastewater municipal engineer, and he will be filling in for some of my duties that I've had here in the city, so.
Thank you, Bob. Jeff, welcome. So with that, we have no other business. A motion to adjourn would be in order. We have a motion by Mr. Horsfall. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Manley. All in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried. We're adjourned.